Oh god. I just looked over and on my YouTube recommendation, there's just this one picture. The artist I know is good. He's a good artist, but he fucked up on this one picture. The eyes are not looking at all in the right position.
I trust this will
Oh wait,
suffice.
wait, I need to screen capture. Metaphor. My metaphor.
Oh, away with you! Back to your cesspit, beggar!
There we go. You know what, in all honesty, I don't think there's gonna be too much talking in my game right now. So I'm actually just gonna do this.
They started looking into it.
So you guys can hear what I listen to when I'm playing games.
Mostly, it doesn't seem to be that true, but there are some sectors where this does appear to be happening. There is more market concentration, and it is leading to more profitability. But then the kicker to the study was they said, but in those sectors, those are mostly state-owned sectors. So the additional profits that are coming from this market power are just flowing to the state to fund the welfare state. So it's actually decreasing inequality. And I was like, that's such a great, like, what a perfect, like, you know, encapsulation of what, at least to my mind, a socialist wants to point out. Like,
oh, I need to update restream.
In a weird way, capital income, which is the most unevenly distributed income, could be the most evenly distributed.
Alright, I do this on my main monitor so I can actually see everything.
Invest and make money. Like, I have money in a 401k and it went up 22%. I don't know what the hell I did. I just
screen.
Whereas
update
labor,
titles.
that's the one where it's actually a little harder.
That's
people need to work, and their productivity does matter to some extent, depending on what you want to pay them. But like, people in a coma can collect capital income, you know. So yeah, I think there's a lot of hope, whether you view it from like everyone will be on the same team and cheer for the companies, or from an egalitarian perspective, because we'll be able to more evenly distribute the income, or
simplicity
analytics
of levying perspective as well, right? Yeah. Salience and everything too. Yeah. I would argue, I would give my pushback in that detention is probably good to some extent. Like, some antagonism or tension is good because you don't want to have like severe distortions where a single owner in the market is, even if it's profitable, they're significantly delaying like advances in tech or something because they have no desire to innovate or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think largely I do agree with the concept. Actually, it's funny when you bring up the centralization of like capital and making money. I have this very, probably one of my more radical economic ideas. I actually hate the concept of almost any vertical ownership, and almost, I don't like the concept of corporate acquisition like at all. I think the idea of creating a company to sell it to another company, I just think it's anti-competitive. I don't like it. I think it's stupid. And companies buying things like vertical.
So we have 20-something days. I think the biggest thing I have, let's see.
You can internalize like in-house more.
We have the 3 trials. I can't do that until I'm like level 70 plus. I think.
I think it's really toxic. I think it's crazy how huge.
Rocketries in the Clouds and Apostle of the Apocalypse.
Yeah, well, that's what the antitrusters
and the Edge of
talk
Glory
about as well.
The Mount Vulcanid.
Yeah, I mean,
Grace
you
Ruins,
could always IPO. I
in the Manor of Ascent
to be acquired, right? In order to
but nobody wants. Where there are people. I have a friend. Like people,
and
there are people who make businesses
the last one,
just to sell.
Actually,
the goal is acquisition.
I might need to visit one side dungeon or a random dungeon.
Yeah, exactly.
To get the last.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question of sort of the structure of specific firms.
I just realized I should probably check to see.
Sort of like the regulation.
I'm gonna pause that.
Like people,
and then
there are people who make
the last one
just to sell.
Actually,
the goal is acquisition.
I might need to visit one side dungeon or random. You know, that's fine. That's not too loud.
Question, right? It's like, well, sometimes I could see the vertically integrated firm is more efficient than the nut, but it just depends on the sector, you know, and the particular company and how it's operating now. So I find the like regulatory question there very difficult, because you can't say like literally every acquisition is not. There are no synergies that might be productivity enhancing, but you can't say they all are like that either. So how do we distinguish between the ones that are just pure, like market power grabs, and the ones that are actually like creating a more like rational structure for a specific kind of production?
If you could, I guess if you could snap your finger and make like one or two huge policy changes in terms of economics or welfare and everything. I'll say broadly economics in the United States. What do you think are things that would help this country or move all of us in a better direction?
The number one is the universal welfare state. That's, I think, as far as creating equality and stability, the most, that's the biggest impact. So we have this already to some extent.
Did I stream yesterday? I can't remember.
Benefits. We have disability benefits. Those aren't universal. There are some people who are excluded from those. You could, include everyone in Social Security. Child benefit. We have unemployment.
Oh, I did, because that was Wednesday, and I hung out with Noam. When did this person follow me?
So that anyone who was
Kiwi
job
Sick,
searching
thank you for the
in one way or
follow.
another, whether they, were
I wasn't live, I
fired,
think, when you followed me, but I appreciate it.
And the main part where our welfare state lags, because we have those other benefits, they're just not as generous as other countries, is in child benefits. We spend the lowest amount of our GDP on child benefits of any OECD country. I think maybe Turkey spends less or something like that, but of any kind of advanced nation. And so I have this paper called the Family Fun Pack, which is basically just me copying from like the child benefit regimes of other countries, and just kind of here's how you would do it in the US. But it would be a universal monthly payment for children, $300 a month, $350 a month, whatever. We had that for like 6 months under the Biden administration. It would be free childcare, free pre-K, just like we have free public school. I also, in the paper, say if you want to do childcare yourself, because a lot of people do prefer before maybe the age of 3 to take care of their kids at home, you could get a payment for that.
I don't think there's anything really worthwhile to do.
Free childcare. Free health care for children. I mean, I'd like to see that for everyone, but at least
do I
for
need
children,
wisdom or courage upgraded more?
Free school lunch.
Oh, courage is max.
States have.
Yeah, we need to hang out with Hulkenberg then. That's the only one that's actually worthwhile doing.
Or baby bonus, like white
Oh yeah,
have
do
a kid,
have ingredients.
some resources.
Ew.
If you put that all together, you can essentially wipe out child poverty, or come very close to wiping out child poverty, and that would put us up with the peer nations. But basically, kind of that structure across all the welfare needs, mostly just copying what exists in like Norway or Finland. That thing is like number one.
Two questions, I guess. So the first one is, do you feel like there's been compelling research to show, or compelling examples in other countries to show that this wouldn't be too large a disincentive for people to work or participate in the economy?
No, I mean, these benefits have been in place in some of these countries for 100+ years. So especially if you're just talking about child benefits, we have like free school, and stuff like that. So it doesn't seem to be like the way you would look at this. You'd look at the employment rate, right? What percentage of adults between the ages of 25 and 54, that's usually the prime age employment rate, what percentage of them like get up and go to work every day? And the U.S. does not beat these other countries. In fact, in many of these countries, they beat the U.S. Like Sweden has a higher prime age employment rate than the U.S. has. Now that's mostly because women work more often, but still, there are more people getting up and going to work every day in Sweden than there is in the U.S., despite the much more generous welfare state.
I would have never is that true? Is that measuring like the U3 or the U6? Does that include discouraged workers? Because I would have imagined the prime age employment for the U.S. would have been higher unless.
No, see, so what they do is, so you're thinking about the unemployment rate.
Yeah.
And when you're doing cross-country comparisons, because the countries will measure the unemployment rate differently.
Yeah.
Instead of counting how many people are unemployed, just count the number of people who are employed, because we could count them, how many people get up to work, and then divide that by the population. So we're not talking about 3%, 5% employment. It'll be like 80% employment or 84%.
Okay, so your prime age labor force participation, basically.
Yeah, participation, but actually employed.
Employed people. Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Then the second question, and I guess I got to ask a third bonus question. The second question would be, how do you pay for it?
Taxes. I mean, it could be as simple as a payroll tax if you wanted to.
What are your favorite taxes? What do you think is the best way to tax?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, so there are a couple considerations, I think, two competing considerations that generate different conclusions. And the one is you're like, I want it to be as progressive as possible, right? Take as much from the top, and that's nice, right? If you can do that, why not? Because then you both get to fund the program and reduce inequality, like up front. But the other consideration is you want, and we talked about this before, you want the tax to be not salient.
Weapon assisted wheel, hell of a hike.
People don't they can't really.
Oh
tell
yeah, okay. So we're gonna get the
tax, and there are a couple of taxes that work like this.
I think we can get a boss here, the secret sword.
You know, every dollar you pay your worker, you have to pay,
the last item for Neuros for his
that
friendship,
doesn't, the employee
and we're just gonna power
this.
grind a
The
bit.
employee also has the employee side of the Social Security tax, but the employer side is like totally opaque to them. And in Sweden, that tax is over 30%.
Jesus. Okay. That's okay.
But
Sorry.
it all,
I heard a little bit, but I understand.
It all gets factored into wages, right? So ultimately, it's the worker who pays, but it's opaque, right? So the employer goes, okay, look, if every dollar I have to pay to a worker, I have to also pay 30 cents to the state. Let me do the math. The worker needs to get paid this instead. So it all works out. It's not a problem for profitability or anything like that.
I'm gonna I want to look at the ones that are like
bring a European to the United States, and the craziest thing,
normal or hard.
Craziest things. There's a lot of crazy things about America, but one of the things they'll experience is you go shopping.
Prince,
with
Dark Knight, Mass Dancer, Summoner. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Wait, why
but that guy's only like
$6 more? What's happening?
Yes.
Like, oh, that's sales tax. And it's like, that's not on the price tag. No.
Elemental
That's a bonus
Master,
that you discover at the cash register. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because that's the other
Persona Master.
Persona tax is the value-added tax they have, which is a sales tax that you don't ever see.
I think that should be fine. It's like the average level is about 55 to 60, I would say.
Register, and obviously
I'm already at
intellectually
60,
aware
I think.
that this thing is. But
yeah,
people,
we should be fine.
Their
we'll be
sense
fine.
of price is very nominal. You know, like they get used to the price, you know, and unless you have a big run up at prices like we had, you just kind of get used to like why is a candy bar $2 or what, I don't know, why isn't it 50 cents? These numbers don't mean anything. You just kind of get used to them. And so with the VAT, the prices move up and you don't see it, you don't experience it's nowhere, and you can raise just a ton of money. But it's a very regressive tax, right? Because it's a sales tax.
Yeah.
Like that's the
two huge examples I can think of for that is one, obviously my background is in gaming, and games have to be $60. They just have to be. You can't make a game for more than $60 or people will revolt. And it's very funny to think that when I was growing up, a PlayStation, you go to the store, a game is $60.
You know what? I just realized
games were made.
Okay, this would actually be so nice. I already have this set up. I keep realizing I have so many nice little things I've set up that I could just do forever. Okay, so I want to try this. I just realized I could also have this up on screen. Is that actually... Oh, it shows up on screen, but it's not synced up. Oh no, I have it over here.
He was saying that he would always write his withholding number
but
one higher because then for
wait,
tax time he would get back a bigger tax refund.
Yeah.
And obviously me being the hyper intelligent 19-year-old, you know, I was at the time I was like, oh well, actually give me a tax-free loan to the government, and that's a really bad idea. And it's like, no.
Actually, you know what? Wait, we're not.
And I'm like, okay. And so eventually, because we're going back and forth, and I feel pretty strong on this, so we end up roping in like 7 or 8 coworkers. Every single person agreed with him.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? And so you're right to some extent that that lack of salience, a lot of people don't feel. They just know that, like, if you ask a person like, oh, like, what do you get paid? Or like, I get paid, you know, $1,800 a month or whatever. Or you ask somebody when they buy a car, how much is your car? And they're like, $500 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I used to for a while I was curious because people get refunds. A lot of people get more, you know, at tax time they get a refund. And so I hit upon this idea for a second, like there've got to be a significant minority of people who think that income tax government gives you money, because that's literally how they relate to it. And I started searching, I would search get income tax on Twitter around tax time to see, and you would pull up all these tweets, and like, I don't know how representative it is, but you would find people who were like, I got my income tax today, we're going to Red Lobster or whatever. Like, it was a lot of funny stuff. People would put memes of them like just, you know, money coming everywhere, and like, these people really did seem to think that like the income tax is a program where the government gives you money. And I was like, that's wild.
Yeah.
It's like people hate taxes, but these people love taxes because they think taxes is where you get money from the government.
Yeah, that's not surprising at all. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and it sounds like this guy kind of he had a little more sophisticated thought about it, but he still was basically like, this is whatever. It feels like I'd get a bunch of money, so that's great.
So more welfare states around children, which I think is important. It's kind of funny because I think maybe it's normal, maybe it's abnormal. I grew up incredibly conservative Cuban mom, libertarian, basically, a big Ron Paul supporter. And I was probably the most libertarian after I had to quit school to continue work, and I was like a carpet cleaner or whatever. And then as soon as I became a streamer and started to make more money there, it was through the lens of my child that I started to move significantly to the left, because I was like, holy shit, like my kid's life, I can buy a house in the best school district, I can provide like all these things or whatever. And no offense to my wonderful son, he didn't do anything to earn this at 4 years old. Like you don't deserve any of this shit. Literally just, I think seeing disparate outcomes in children just really bothers me, because they've done nothing.
Everything is working now, except for my closed captioning.
How do you say no to lunch for kids? That's fucking crazy to me.
Yeah, no. The
preview.
Kids are, I say a couple things about kids in this paper. One is that they're just like the elderly and the disabled, who we already give
just one, two.
Their age makes it so they can't work like the old, and kids are very disabled. You ever met a child? They're all mentally handicapped to begin with. Of course, we don't think of child disability that way. We compare them to other children, but like they have those inabilities, and so they're inherently dependent. There's no question of like, are they going to support themselves? So why should we make a child, at least their basic outcomes, based on what their parents happen to earn? Because this comes up in the discourse as well. It's like, what about their parents? Like, don't we want them? It's like, I mean, so let's say their parents do suck. Obviously, some parents suck.
I'm cool with that.
Do we want kids to suffer because of that? Do we want to shield them? Like, they're victims in that process.
Oh, now it actually works.
Yeah, it's what is it called? Cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah.
It's like, like children are one of the, it's just like one, and I'll argue this, depending on who I'm talking about. We can use the coldest terms possible. Like, these are future tax generators. Like, why would you, like, you can either have a kid who's going to grow up and you're going to waste money arresting him, throwing him in jail and spending money there, or you can invest money in him now and have him go to college and become a productive member of society. Like, and I know it's not necessarily that simple, but there are like some, I think the two most empirically backed, maybe you know more, the two most empirically backed things I've heard of is like air conditioner in schools, especially where it gets hot, and food for kids so that they're eating, so that they're not hungry. These are like no-brainer investments.
Yeah. There was a study, there was an Indian tribe that decided to take their casino profits and just give them out as a basic income, and there was a lot of studies about the results that had on the kids in the tribe, and they were all very positive, like psychological, criminality down, all that kind of stuff, which makes sense. The other thing you were saying before that reminded me is when it comes to the blameworthiness of kids, whether they earned it. One of the interesting things when you look in the child poverty data, that at least it seemed whenever I present this to people, they're always like, oh, I never thought of that, is
okay, we're gonna mute alerts.
Their poverty rates fall. So if you take the poverty rates of like kindergartners,
then
it's the best way to do it is with their grades.
It should just be desktop.
Poverty rates of kindergartners, like I don't know, like let's say 20%, and then when you get to like 11th graders, their poverty rates are like
filters, add game,
almost a third. And you're like, what's going on? Why does the kindergartner
40?
They're all children. What's happening?
Display for a bit. Yep.
And then when you're older, you make raises.
So it's going to be that when you come into kindergarten, that was probably the most burdened point for the parents for not working. Because the mom is going to be at home or whatever.
Well, what you'll see is you do it at every grade. So like kindergarten, first, second, third. And the only difference is that the parents are older, and then therefore they're sort of further along in their career.
I think that's okay.
And so children have this very unique thing that's not true of these other
I don't know.
groups, where
if there's an issue or someone is unhappy, they'll let me know.
Because of the way fertility works, there's this biological reality of when you can have kids. You typically will have kids in your mid-20s. That's the average. Obviously, some people later, but that's before you're in an entry-level kind of job, more or less, at that point, and you can't really accumulate savings. So what are you supposed to do with this kid? You know, like at least when you're old, you could say, well, we don't need Social Security. People should have saved up money for it. Or maybe with disability, for some of that, people could have saved up money because most people get disabled older on, or maybe they could have bought some kind of insurance or something.
Let's
What do
stash
you do
that
with
somewhere
kids?
safe.
Like if people are having kids in their 20s, which is when it kind of makes sense to have kids for the most part, entry-level jobs, don't have a lot of wealth, a lot of kids are going to be poor. Like and the great thing about the welfare state is it can kind of smooth that out for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you're 50 and you're an empty nester, you'll be making all this money, and to spend on what? The kids are gone, you know? So we can maybe reduce some of your income when you're 50, pump it up when you're in your 20s and taking care of these little kids, and really it all just washes out at the end of the day. You just have a better life.
Yeah, not even washes out. It produces an overall better outcome,
Yeah,
right? Like
because
it'd
the
be
kids
more
are more
aggregate.
productive.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those areas where there are a couple areas. The most frustrating things for me are where we should have congruency between the two sides, but there's stupid ideological baggage that prevents people from coming together on this, because liberals should love welfare, and conservatives always complain about lack of children and people not having kids.
Yeah,
and
especially.
yeah, one of the biggest precursors to getting married and starting a family is your financial well-being. And it's very frustrating that that's not a thing. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's having kids or not, but like listening to people make arguments about like against like school lunches and stuff. It's just even my son going to school and hearing the teachers have to be beggars for like, can you guys bring like Kleenex or can you guys bring markers? And it's like, man, this is like I'm giving you my child to watch for 8 hours a day, and you guys are, yeah, that's just all that is insane.
You have I give you, you know, if you're destiny debates type of tactic here, is when you're dealing with a school lunch skeptic, just ask them about.
I don't really want to jump down because I don't know where it
I don't
goes.
know what to do because the school bus is free,
Yeah.
and like, why would you want to make people pay for the school bus? I have to pay for all the other buses that I take. Why not have the kids pay for the bus? And the school bus program costs about the same as the school lunch. It actually costs a little bit more than free school lunch.
Okay, that's pretty good.
And you know,
Okay.
there's lots of. I have found that that's very, because what's going on there is just status quo bias, right?
Yeah.
We have this. That's the largest
What
public.
are these guys?
Largest
Oh,
public
well, I guess I'll find out.
in the U.S. is the school buses. It's just people don't even think about it. It's
Yeah, once you've been granted a thing, you can't really touch it. It's very difficult.
You can't touch it, and they don't even see it.
Yeah.
They don't like, wait a minute, we could charge fares for these buses. Like, that isn't even occurring to somebody. Of course not. We don't charge the fare for
Wish we got a miss earlier.
for the food. You literally don't.
56. Okay, that's not too strong.
Education is
56.50.
Like when I was in high school, I played football and I did the debate team. And like there was obviously money involved there. Like I didn't pay anything. I didn't pay for the pads. I didn't pay for whatever, the transportation to the debate tour. They all took care of that. You could charge for all that. You could charge for any number of things. You could charge for the Kleenexes, which essentially and for some reason we don't really charge for any of it until you go to eat, and then they want you to give them like $2.
Yes.
$2, like that's the whole.
Wait, I'm sorry, did I just say
$15,000
bills cost $0?
$2 for lunch, and then it creates all this headache because you have to have this.
Increases strength to synth skills
I
that
know,
costs
yeah,
you.
I gotta
Oh,
refill
okay,
the
it's the
lunch
same as
card,
this
like,
one,
every month.
but it's 100 higher.
Yeah,
So
it's insane to
much
think,
better.
Like, I'm sending
Cool.
you to like an
Big ups.
8-hour camp every single day, you're 5 days a week or whatever, but I have to give you a thing for lunch. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's,
We're gonna hire all these cashiers. There was there was a report put out by, I think it was the CFPB, where they said that the like the payment processors that run the school lunch systems in most of these districts, they tried to figure out like how much they charge. It was something like $100 million a year, you know, for just like swipe fees essentially, and you know, whatever. That's not a huge sum in the grand scheme of like the U.S., but why are we giving credit card companies any amount of money for the food? Like you could just give the food out,
yeah.
and then you don't have to hire the cashier. Like there's all this administrative costs, and like for what? Because we want to make sure that if a kid doesn't come with money, they don't eat. Like that's the goal, and so we have this elaborate payment system to facilitate
Your
that.
enemies around. Watch
It's
your
just
step.
it's deranged.
There they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
We attack the
Nothing in my it just slipped my mind.
Ooh, nice.
So for big policy changes, you mentioned welfare-related stuff, especially around children. What are things you're looking forward to, not in a positive or negative case? Like, what do you think is actually going to happen in this upcoming administration? Do you think that Trump is actually going to tariff everything globally? Is that going to happen?
I'm unclear on this, because there was some reports saying that they were constructing some bills to do that. I'm a little bit unclear on, I probably should know this, but tariffs just haven't been a big thing since, you know, the 20s or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is he able to do that? Does he need a bill pass to do that?
I think you can do some tariffs for up to like 15% if it's like if you say it's a national emergency thing, but that could be anything, and you might be able to extend them. Plus, the Supreme Court might let Trump do anything, like who even actually knows.
Under the major questions, might not allow him to reinterpret that way. But I'd say the more you have to push it through Congress, the less likely, obviously, that it's going to happen.
I could get used to this.
You know, whatever you think of, like, the Republicans, the tariffs are not good for local business either. Like, as much as you think about it, like, what's protectionist? Well, it depends on what business you are. If you're you take steel, well, if you're a steel maker, tariffing steel is good. If you're a steel user, which there are far more steel users in the U.S. than there are steel makers, it's bad. So
something you brought up earlier that's very frustrating, and actually it kind of applies to almost everything we've spoken about, is this concept of localized losses and generalized gains are always psychologically horrible. That if I could obliterate with a magical wand, okay, Detroit's manufacturing, and I could lower prices across all of the United States by 15%, everybody would view that as horrible, even though the gain is like undeniable. People will point to over and over again, right, the loss of some of our manufacturing cities and some of the how run down some of these places get, and nobody can see any of the money saved on anything else. And then you end up in this like perpetual state of broken windows fallacy, where it's like I can break a window over and over again and think, what a win. Like the guy that comes in and buys, you know, I get a repair guy who's making money, he buys glass and they're making money, and the argument for the broken windows fallacies is not that he's not making money in the glass argument, it's that he could have spent that money elsewhere. And I feel like nobody considers that okay, well, let's say that we tariff things, and now we have local manufacturers that are now making more money. That is true. Now we'll ignore the one issue that you said, that most of that surplus wealth is just going to go to the business owners, not the workers themselves necessarily. But also, you're paying more money for everything now. Everybody's paying more money in a regressive manner for everything, because I don't care if I've got to pay 2 times as much for a t-shirt. Somebody that shops at Walmart might. But also there's money that's not going to other things. That if I have to spend $200 on clothes, you know, this month for my kid instead of $100, that's $100 that I could have spent at a local store that makes instruments or something else, you know?
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's like from the first-person finance perspective, and then from the aggregate economic perspective. There they are. Like you said before, you know, maybe if we had 10% unemployment or 20% unemployment, but we have a tight labor market, so if you're going to reallocate production towards these industries that you're going to tariff, if that's the idea, and it actually works the way you want it to, we're going to need to be pulling
where you're taking from.
Yeah, someone's got to go. We're going to take them out of the child care centers.
Right there.
Where we're having labor shortages in like every single other market.
Yeah, like, so what are we going to produce less of? Now, that's not a thing you have to answer, because the market will figure it out. People will change the way they spend, and like it'll all suss out. But like that's something you should think about, is that you're going to have to forego a lot of production that we're currently producing if you're going to reallocate all this labor. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. In this case, it's sort of, I don't know, like, you know.
That's another frustrating thing to me, is hearing and I know there's more like social, cultural issues at play into it, but like in the same breath, you know, someone will say, we have to do tariffs because people like Mexico, they're able to just like, you know, basically hose us down on trade because they've got so many workers that are willing to do all this, and then in the next breath, like, we have to deport all these illegal immigrants. We got to keep these people from coming in our country. It's like, well, wait, hold on. If Mexico has so much fucking benefit from having these workers, and these guys all want to come to the U.S., why not just fucking let them in and then make them citizens and then pay them, lower the minimum wage, or whatever the fuck you want to do, and like pay them? Why
is this the sword?
Because they're so like
Rusty,
these guys are such
sword.
a threat to domestic manufacturing in that country, and they want to come here and work. Yeah, but it's just. Yeah, it's frustrating, man. The immigration stuff is frustrating too. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that is something he'll probably do. Is they'll do a lot of immigration-related stuff, because they did that last time. Now.
Well, the thing that worries me about that is that there's going to be no legislation because no one has the slightest idea.
But like enforcement stuff.
That's the scary part because the type of enforcement they're talking about is like the worst type, which is even if you have the coldest, most desensitive, detached view possible, the DACA motherfuckers, I've already paid to educate them. I know they're not committing crimes because they have to register and keep their number. These are the last people in the world you should want to deport from an economic perspective. Just as they're starting to enter years where they can earn money and pay taxes, the DACA, I think, is the biggest thing that I think he can rescind. And I'm pretty sure he has the authority to rescind that if he just does it correctly this time, because he didn't last time. And I think that would be
an executive order in Obama.
Yeah, and I think the way that, because last time he tried to do it, he was basically just like an asshole. Like that was more or less that like you've given no reason for this policy aside from the fact that you just don't like it. Like if you just do this better next time, he would have the ability to do it, but he's not doing it. But what a loss to waste so much money educating a group of children that now you're just going to ship back to Mexico for why?
Yeah. I mean, in general, that whole
Leave it to me. What's in the
angle.
Oh, that's so bad.
Really disturbing. It's such a weird.
Thank you.
They also have more children, but I guess that's the whole thing. They don't like the brown certain people having kids.
Well, careful, because man, I'm going to say after this last election, a lot of conservatives might be looking at Latinos a bit differently, which is frustrating. He's always told them, you guys are just less racist. These people are very socially conservative. Okay, the trans marches at schools are not. They're not Hispanic immigrants. Okay, they're all white people, you know.
No, they're very Christian and pretty socially conservative, especially for second generation. It seems to ameliorate over time.
It is your turn.
Degraded and whatever, but that is an interesting. I did actually think that on election day. I was like, I wonder maybe at one point they'll soften more on Latinos because they view them as potential.
some healing power?
But I guess. The idea here is that Latinos maybe are not even turned off about the immigration stuff. At least a lot of them, like, that's the stuff not something they care about. I mean, obviously, once that vote are legal, they're not going to be.
How simple.
Yeah.
It depends on what kind of ethnic solidarity extends to illegal immigrants. I don't know.
And probably not. I feel like one of it's simultaneously like very sad and very cool at the same time. It's cool because we can do it. I think we do integration of different types of people into the United States in such a phenomenal way. Better than any country that I'm aware of, at least. I'm not the most well-traveled person, but we just have so many different types of people here that work together as Americans so well. Like you can dip into like the problem with Muslims or radical Islam or whatever. Like we have a lot of Muslims that live in the United States. They're pretty fucking chill. Like they just are. A lot of the Hispanic people that immigrate here, like they immigrate really well. I am aware through Europe, especially after Syria 2013, there are definitely issues relating to illegal immigrants and immigrants through Europe. But like the people that come to the United States, like the people that illegally immigrate here, they're doing it for arguably, I would say like the best reasons. They want to come to America because they just come here even illegally and they work. There's like a better life and opportunity for them. And to hear conservatives just say oh, they're just coming here to steal our welfare, which is already fucking hilarious because like wow, the amazing welfare state of the United States, give me a fucking break.
Going to Canada.
yeah, they wouldn't stop. Yeah, and then there's also like the meme of like the mythical immigrant who's
oh my god, which way do I
stealing your jobs and your welfare, all of this.
Oh, I think I need to find the correct drop-down point.
It is, that is one of the interesting points in favor of the U.S. Obviously I tend to be more partial to Europe because of the welfare states that they have and higher degrees of socialization, but
wait, what am I doing?
As tough as it is maybe for some people to digest this, the U.S. at least internally, if you're not thinking about maybe foreign policy and stuff, that does.
So all those drop-down points are to the top of the chamber. That doesn't matter.
Honestly, than a lot of Europe is,
Up.
and yeah, I mean with the immigration, you can see this very clearly.
Oh, okay. I need to go up this ladder.
Because the discourse.
Oh no, it was this ladder. I need to go up.
Europe is just so different. I mean, I guess it's not different, but it's there. It seems to connect to something that's real. I think something that's manageable, but that is that. Yeah, if you look at the employment rates of immigrants in whatever.
So there's no chest to the left.
Amsterdam.
There is an enemy.
It's like they have a much lower employment rate. If you look at the employment rates of immigrants in the U.S., they're higher.
Not this one. I think it's
Like,
to the very
so, like,
far
we have
right
the
end to
reverse,
go.
total reverse situation. And it's like
Maybe.
it's not even a problem to be managed. Like they come in and they
Or
work
is there no
for
boss for?
you,
No, there
and
has to be a boss for this stuff.
and they can't take the benefits because they're not eligible for the benefits, you know, because that's the other thing. It's like, well, what about like welfare shopping, and they're gonna come in, like they don't even do that. So it's like higher employment, they're ineligible. I think the actual issue you have with immigrants, you know, from a left perspective, is there's like an exploitation, like, you know, they're not full citizens. But like from the right wing perspective, you think, well, you're missing the boat here. Like these people are full-blown second-class citizens, so all the things you're worried about can't even be true of them.
Yeah, but then the politics gets in the way because they think that these people are like illegally voting en masse.
Yeah, they invent like these guys are voting and they're claiming Medicaid, and it's like none of that's true. They come in, they don't make very much money, they have super high employment rates, and they kind of essentially make natives' lives a lot better.
Just hungry?
Arguably because of the exploitation, right? Because they're so underpaid, you know. But from your perspective, you don't even care about that. So instead, you have to invent a fully opposite view of what's going on here.
And the arguments in favor are like so overwhelming and so there are some that are just so like unintuitive, like I don't even bother making it. Like I don't think I've ever seen anything contradicting Cato publishes or at least writes papers a lot about this, the Cato Institute. Like I'm pretty sure illegal immigrants are even fiscally beneficial because a lot of them work off of like stolen social security numbers, so they're paying income taxes and stuff into systems where they can't get benefits out because they can't go to an office and show an ID and extract anything. And then also just by ages, right? Like these are working people that are of a that one of the most disappointing things to me, and also like when you think of, it's so funny because conservatives will talk about, you know,
I don't know how to get to that very bottom one.
Or they used to, not anymore. And it's like, well, one of your biggest economic inputs is your labor market, and there is like there is a version of America where conservatives aren't insane that like. And I understand it would be a lot, but I legitimately I feel like you could flip a switch right now and just have 20 million more citizens, and you would.
Okay, wait. I need to figure out where the fuck I'm going. I'm so lost.
People that are here, you know, letting people in more freely. Like if people want to come and work, you know, our labor markets are already incredibly tight. Like it benefits everybody. Everybody is made better off for it. And then if you want to bring back your base level manufacturing, whatever, well, now you've got the labor force to do it. And fuck, like why not? Yeah. Yeah, that's frustrating to me.
And it's such a, you know, one of the big challenges you have, if you care about this, and I guess conservatives don't, but this is like questions of global justice, you know, like
absolutely not. That's funny though that you think they're.
I focus so much on domestic policy, you know, like creating equality within the U.S., but there's always, of course, a question of, well, but the U.S. is a relatively rich nation. What about equality across the globe? And there's always like, you know, if you look at other countries, they'll have like a foreign aid budget, and they'll want to say, we'll put 1% of GDP every year in the foreign aid budget. And, you know, there's some notion that you have some global responsibility. The U.S. isn't such a sweet spot because to the extent that you want to say, well, we have some responsibility to the globe, but maybe not total, like we do need to think about our own country first or whatever. Well, how do we discharge that? Well, unlike these other countries that have to have these foreign aid budgets, and not that we should get rid of that, but like, they have a lot bigger foreign aid budgets. The U.S. can discharge that by just letting people in. Like, that's all you have to do. And it benefits you. Like, you get to increase global equality in a way that is domestically beneficial. And, like, but, like, it's if you care at all. If you have any kind of inkling of, like, yeah, I do think we need to think also not just about, like, advanced nations, you know, so.
It's really, and I don't even try those arguments because I get so frustrated. But like when you talk about like the asylum process, like I do believe there is an issue right now with people abusing the asylum process 100%. But to get anybody to even honestly engage with what asylum is or what it means is impossible. Like the issue that we have right now, and it's hard because there's so many I don't want to say bad faith actors, but people that really they just don't want any immigrants, so they'll pretend to have a criticism and then they'll, you know, present an argument. It's like, well, what are you actually arguing for? People will argue a thing like they'll say like remain in Mexico is good. And my argument is always, because I think the bipartisan immigration bill would have been good to get more judges and more funding to process these asylum claims faster. And I'll always start with like, do you think that people should be able to claim asylum? Because people won't even be on board with that. Because if you do,
there's no good map that shows like
when you look at things like remain in Mexico, these policies
how do I get to
are fucking terrible. Like, let's say that it was the case that somebody felt like they were being persecuted, you know, for their race, gender, religion, whatever. They were suffering horribly in some country, and they, you know, were able to come to the United States to claim asylum. You want to kick these people, you know, south to have them stay in some halfway camp in another country for 6 weeks? Like, why would you ever want to do that? Like, would you? I mean, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but like, if a Jew was fleeing, you know, Nazi Germany with asylum, would you say, well, you need to go remain in Mexico
here we go.
You process your claim? Like, that's such a crazy. But people will always make immigration.
Disconnect
I never economics.
Disconnect
I really hate all the topics. When people talk about immigrants, the quickest way that I can always pick out if somebody is full of shit is if they interchangeably speak about legal immigrants, illegal immigrants, and then like people that have like temporary protected status, so asylum seekers or whatever. Anytime people are quick to use all of these interchangeably, I'm like, these are totally different groups of people that have totally different
wait, do I even have that quest unlocked?
How they participate in our economy, and deserve like totally different treatments. Like, we have different responsibilities to these people. Like, if you start talking about, well, like an asylum seeker, you know, these people don't contribute economically. Chill. These are fucking asylum seekers, okay? You don't go to the fucking ER and find out like if these people are clocking in at their
job. I just not even have
an emergency room. They're sick, right? You have a different set of obligations and everything. But that whole conversation topic is rotted.
Archetype.
Yeah, it seems and maybe this
Part
is
of map. Okay, well, I got that.
Like pre-2016.
That's over in the Disgraced Ruins. Caucus Street Cloud. Oh, there just isn't an enemy here. Okay.
It got really,
I'll just
really abusive
peace out.
Quickly, in a really weird way. And I know some conservative writers will say, well, like, there's sort of anti-immigrant backlash across the West, and
that's a bit weird, but okay.
Far-right populism, but like I said before, just the U.S. is exceptional.
Doesn't matter. I can just go to town.
Historically and present, that it just.
Our one like Muslim terrorist attack was some fucking loser who wanted to be like in ISIS. That Miami, it was a shooting here or whatever, and he was like, I'm ISIS, and they're like, we don't even know this dude. That was like the one attack that we had. It was like
the gay club.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben Shapiro, okay, hated rival of mine, said one thing that I've thought about a little bit, and I do wonder if this is a thing we'll have to confront more. Raising the retirement age. So one observation, two observations hand in hand, I guess, is...
Actually, wait, I need to look this up also. I need to look up so many things for this game. How do I even get the elite archetypes? I thought I would get it by maxing out my friendship, but I still don't have it.
67, okay. So say the, life expectancy at birth is like 70, that's one thing. Say life expectancy is 80, is that
reaching a certain rank on both basic and adept archetypes and reaching bond rank 6 to 8 for select followers.
And my second question is kind of like piggybacked on this is another
certain rank on both basic and adept.
Medical consumption is very, 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 very high for these years as well.
Wait, do I have to get it with my main character too? Because that might be the issue I'm having.
Just because this is a little pet peeve of mine. When people push raising the retirement age, it's a funny thing because the retirement age, which is the full retirement age, is a variable.
Because what is it? Falkenberg already has literally like
income you get.
Actually, we'll even unlock this just to have that. So she technically has everything in her tree unlocked.
62.
Yeah.
And so there's what 96 retirement ages because the amount you get depends on what month you retire in. And so I just mentioned this because whenever they propose raising the retirement age, in your mind you would think, okay, so we're gonna make 62.
So it's either these need to be max level,
70 to 72,
or Wilhelm needs to have it unlocked.
That's not what they do. They just raise the thing from from 65 to 67, which doesn't change the fact that you can retire anytime from 62 to 70. It just cuts the benefits at all 96 retirement ages because the way the formula works.
Gotcha. Except for the very last one, I'm guessing. Right.
No, 70 as well. Because the way the formula is set up, it's all done as it's essentially you take the month that you retire and the distance of that month from the full retirement age will affect whether you get more or less than the full retirement amount.
Yeah, or that my question that's what I meant. Like, if full retirement was given at 65 and then they put it at 67, if you retire at any point, you're going to get less But if you retire at the full retirement age of 67, it would still be the full.
If you instead of retiring at 65 decided to retire at 67.
Yeah.
But imagine someone who retired at 67 in both systems. So everyone's just cut. If you wait longer, you could get.
Sure.
And so I just think it's just a kind of a weird. If you want people to retire later, I guess that helps. But like you also could just.
I'm looking for
the thing up from like 64.
This one.
Anyways,
it's the Royal Knight.
That old age benefits is something that you have to manage because old age, elderly people, they don't produce if they're retired.
Redraink Eggs with Hulkenberg, done that.
So
prerequisite Paladin, 20, got that. Dark Knight, 20.
People that I think can get the point across.
Players can unlock the Royal Knight archetype by studying it at the cost of 30,000 mag, as well as reaching a certain archetype rank. Cannot be base.
My bad. Don't have to imagine.
There was some talk about this in COVID, like for a while, because people didn't know. They're like, "What if this was like a severely like?"
Maybe I need to go to more.
Yeah. I guess there's some people think there's a lot of COVID.
Thankfully, it was just a hoax from China that was funded by Jewish people, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. They didn't engineer it well enough, I guess,
clearly,
to take us out. But so now, are we in that situation? Now, it's a funny thing. We're talking about immigration. Obviously, the more working age immigrants you bring in, the less. It's like a balancing act. Like, what percentage of your population is going to be above this threshold? And you have that with children as well. So you have something called the dependency.
Oh wait, we're gonna.
Which is usually measured.
There's no way to pause this, is there?
Like your working age population divided by your whole population.
Not that one.
So since kids and elderly are not there, and so.
Oh, cool! I can literally just. Oh, I can literally just have the screen over here. Oh my god, that's so cool! I've never knew that. I can actually pause and play that video. Sick.
Your abilities know no bounds. Why, it beggars belief. Incredible. Utterly incredible. Incredible.
Oh, this is what I needed. So you need to get more up to rank 6 or 7, whatever this is.
All right.
Wow, he's really gushing this time. Though
Laura is known to be a gusher.
It cannot have been an easy journey, full of meetings and partings, trials and joys, all from which you've come to find your own way of life. There must have been many people who have wished, worked, and given themselves for your support. Indeed, you could never have achieved so much alone. I see. If you have come so far, with motes of the people's light in your wake, then perhaps I was wrong, and the world is not lost to hope. A strange revelation, but I confess, I do not resent being proven wrong.
What is my reward? Just like, I don't fucking care. Give me my shit. No.
I'd like to believe that. I'd say it's not a question of believing, but having the power to believe. The power to wish. Or more aptly for you, the power of fantasy is itself meaningful. Now then, I'd like to present your next task. But, alas, I have none to give. There is nothing more to be done. With this, you have seen our mutual endeavors through to the end. There are two reasons. The first being that my knowledge of archetypes ends here. I have nothing more to teach. You have already mastered the legendary power of the prince. Beyond that, aloft the highest treetops, is a boundary that only you can see. You have outpaced me on the path to the ultimate archetype. I believe I have helped you all I can. As for the other reason...
What's wrong? Oh, by the way, did you get that lost memories thing figured out?
Unfortunately, the rest of my memories have not come to me. However, I did arrive at a conclusion of sorts. Why was I confined here? And where in the world is this place? My apologies, but for now, I'll refrain from explaining my conclusion so simply. Could cast a shadow over the archetype's growth. No, more so your own.
What's that supposed to mean?
This room is not the remains of the Mage Academy. No, it's likely a place the two of you know very well. That you and I met was no coincidence. Everything has been connected from the beginning. If the hypothesis I've reached is correct, my memory will soon return in full, and I will gladly tell you all.
If I had a guess,
yes.
If it's been from the very, very beginning, that means he's in the Elder Village somewhere.
The reason why I wrote the fantasy novel. I mentioned once that in my youth, I went on a journey. I met many people in my travels, and it is for their sakes that I wrote my tale, as an ideal I hoped to make true.
In your youth? You don't look that old to me. You're talking like this is all way in the past.
Ah, indeed. I suppose I am. I shared my stories with the people I cared for dearly, that we might dream of the same future, and thus strive toward it. I've no idea what became of them, or how they now live, but I'm glad to have remembered them. Their echoes have given me a new goal, crystal clear. Someday I will leave this place behind and reunite with my companions. I'd like to give you some tangible token of my appreciation as well. If we only ever meet in this mind space, I can't give you so much as a single letter.
When that time comes, let's go on our own journey together.
And so our odyssey would continue,
Super Mario Odyssey.
Wonderful idea. Thank you. When we met, I styled myself as your guide. But in truth, I think you guided me just as much.
I'm still wondering. I think the biggest thing...
It seems he'd like to show his appreciation too.
I don't think it was the king that actually left more in here. I'm feeling like it was the Elder Queen. Because it seems like the Elder Queen was the one that was much more in tune with what all was going to happen throughout the game.
The scholar in search of utopia, more, keeper and heritor of the seeker's virtues. By the grace of his newfound powers, work to give truth to our hopes and fulfill thy destiny.
Oh, that actually was max rank. I do not know why. I thought increases in archetype status bonuses by +30 while channeling it. Oh, is that for every single archetype? Or is that only for the main character? If it's for everyone, that's a huge bonus I just got. Like, everyone got so much fucking stronger now.
We have a pivotal battle ahead of us, after all. I truly look forward to the day where you master the power of all archetypes and become a hero king, a great unifier of heroic spirits. We will meet again.
You're acting like we're gonna fucking dip on you. Like, I still need to talk with you and make masks and shit.
Look at this.
Design of a new royal archetype have presented themselves. I hope you'll allow me to bear witness.
Welcome.
Okay, can I now do it with Hulkenberg? What is...
Ultimate power.
Really? How? How do I fucking... Wait, did I not just make the Warlock's mask? Or did it get eaten by the Berserker's mask? That's white, Chariot white. Oh no, I made Warlord, not Warlock. I actually can't remember if you're able to change equipment while in battle. If you're able to do that, that actually makes the Mass Dancer an insanely powerful archetype. Ooh, actually Gravelord upgrade. I think that not only gives me a new, like, possible one-shot kill ability, but also a new dual skill thing. That's awesome. Okay.
You have my deepest gratitude. What would you care to know? Well, well. You have my deepest...
Here, kitty.
Oh.
I wonder. Do I need to go up here and, like, read about it?
Okay?
No. What do I need to do?
That is...
Well, this is just kind of frustrating, because, like, I have no idea what needs to be done.
I have retained my edge. My power swells forth.
I see. Fascinate. This, all right?
I don't know. Let me look at that. On reaching Bond 8 with Hulkenberg, players can now unlock the Royal Knight archetype by studying it at the cost of 30,000 magma, as well as reaching a certain archetype rank, should it not be a base archetype. And it just says, prerequisite archetype is Paladin. I need to get both her things up. That's what I'm missing. Okay, that makes sense.
I have retained my edge.
Hulkenberg. She does have that unlocked. Okay, good. I don't know. Do I actually get extra points or like free EXP if I unlock stuff with someone? Because if so, I can burn a lot of the Magla to get more EXP to level up Hulkenberg.
I learned a new ability.
I said this, all right? Of course.
Now let me put this back up.
Well, you know, I think our dependency ratio, I don't know where it is, it's like 50% or something like that. And as that dependency ratio goes up, as children and elderly make up a larger and larger share of the population, well, you're having to spread a smaller amount of production across more people, right? Because the amount of workers is shrinking. And that's just something to be managed. Now, there are countervailing aspects to this because as the economy gets more productive on like an hourly basis, you can produce more stuff, and so maybe that can offset the fact that the dependency ratio is rising. But to me,
I think there is
a practical thing.
There is like an app, but aside from just managing ratios, there is the fact that retirement age was kind of like pegged at an absolute state. And the longevity is increasing, like, meaningfully. And then the consumption. I think another issue I had, I think in the Lancet, I apologize if you're involved in this study. I don't know. But there was this atrociously horrible study that got published in, I think it was the Lancet, showing that like Medicare for All would save so much money, and the way that they had basically mathematically made that argument is they looked at the consumption of they looked at the prices or the cost basically of administering Medicare, and they found that like the administrative ratio to healthcare ratio was like 2%, and then in the private market I think it was like 10 to 20%, and then so they just basically did a simple math like look how much money we would save, and then obviously a ton of people came out to criticize this, and the prevailing criticism was, well, there's two huge things. One is Medicare has the Social Security Administration.
I actually hadn't looked at Warlord yet. That's a pretty cool fucking design. It's got like little what is it, Kaizen Rider looking dog? Oh no, it's like a little orb in the head.
Really expensive healthcare.
I thought it was like Kaizen Rider stuff.
Treatments, it doesn't matter what my administrative cost is. I'm probably paying a much higher percentage of my cost, or an overall a much higher percentage is being paid towards my healthcare. Whereas like for me right now, my guess is in my life, my healthcare costs, if I had insurance, would be like 99% administrative, because I'm not a big consumer of healthcare. So as people get older, they live longer, they're retired for longer, and now they're consuming a huge percentage of medical stuff. Is this like a thing you have a strong opinion about, or you've looked into, or do you think this is sustainable, or?
Yeah, I have seen this, you know, because other countries, the distribution of healthcare spending across ages is not so skewed towards the elderly.
I kind of regret choosing Hulkenberg now, just because she has 2 classes to max out. Also, ooh, I need a pee.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I just realized I have a stream deck. I should learn how to pause and play videos through it. Emergency A, weak HP for everyone.
Yeah.
Is that only through the menu? Recover a medium amount, removes debuffs. Revitalize 3 seems like just an insanely good passive. I need to test to see how much it gives for Hulkenberg, because I'll actually have my main guy, Wilhelm,
my mom called these death
get that skill.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I forgot. I somehow forgot.
Because it just, he burns through so much MP as the Prince archetype.
You know, I don't know if that's a possible path forward, is to attack voluntarily.
Please be enough. I don't think it's enough.
You know, it's
so expensive.
Triaging, like medical.
Okay, one more dungeon.
Spending.
Maybe. Oh wait.
For the time being, that's not.
Maybe.
You know, when you look at why US
oh, thank you.
so much higher than other countries, it's not that the aggregate number of services, like just like denominated, like number of knee surgeries and cancers or whatever, is greater. It's the price of them is a lot higher, and then you have the administrative expenses and drug costs and whatever. Like that drives that delta. It's not.
How is that not it? Do I need to talk to?
So I don't know. I haven't really seen that cited as like a huge issue, you know, for getting costs down.
I don't know. I don't know what they want. He has it maxed out.
I'm familiar with this argument. I don't know how much.
Oh wait, Royal Knight.
I think we disagree on
oh,
this,
I'm so fucking stupid.
Sure.
It's at the very top for everyone.
So,
I'm so dumb.
Yeah, the argument essentially is that
he needs Elemental Master.
Administrative expenses are very.
Holy shit! The requirements for these are insane.
But the denominator is so much bigger.
She needs to max out 2 different skill trees.
Lower. But there were comparisons.
Wait, what is Stroll need?
itself, like the Medicare spending and Medicare
Samurai,
Advantage.
Warlord.
So we have actually a really lovely.
They're just the bottom two, so like nothing.
Plans are run by private insurers.
Izme.
Sort of opt out of the
Ninja.
and you pay Cigna or
An archetype I haven't even unlocked.
so you can see, well, what are their
Is it Faker or?
administrative expenses are right in line.
Wait, it's one that I haven't unlocked at all.
So they'll go up to 10, 12%. Whereas Medicare.
Well, no matter what, I have a lot of time. So let's just unlock random crap.
The office did a study after the 2020 election. Which was
Oh, that's so frustrating. I feel stupid now. I should have just looked up.
and then as soon as they're moved because Bernie
It's really just
like,
fucking look up,
they were
you
like, all right,
idiot.
we've been working on this for a couple of years. We think we got it figured out. And they actually were addressing this question, like, okay, so what would administrative costs be if everything was Medicare? And yeah, on the one hand, elderly people, like, they incorporate all this, and they actually found that the Medicare for all.
I don't really care if I'm burning my Magla. It's like I'm gonna have to farm so many dungeons anyways.
For this is because we think about Medicare
Ninja
as having low,
Tycoon anyways
being
also.
kind of this frictionless thing. You turn 65.
It's the third one.
And that's it. And it's free.
Ninja Blink.
So there's a lot of paperwork that's you don't have to do.
Ninja
That's obviously not true because you pay the Medicare Part B premium.
So it's either.
So they do have to collect these Part B
I
premiums.
forget what the name of this is, but we can't get that till we max him out. Or it's one of these like maxing out Juna or maxing out Yufa or someone.
Which Medicare for all would. The Medicare, you know, they're putting it at like less than
No
2%,
idea. So
1%,
he needs to
whatever.
get maxed out, and so does this other guy,
They say
my
that if
crybaby
we're
boy.
gonna go Medicare for all, the amount of administrative
Soul
expenses
Hacker,
in
which is
aggregate,
her
let's say
upgraded
just from
skill.
That would be 1.8% of GDP.
I do want Yufa as one of my final members.
You know, that's like 10%.
I don't know what else. That must be
Yeah, I was gonna say
this
there's
guy.
an
We need to
interesting
hang out with him
phenomenon
more.
when researcher when you're doing studies. People
Filio,
have this,
I know what his is. It's
you
gonna be
learn a very
this.
basic,
Probably this.
experimental construction sense. Like it's important to have good controls so they can measure variables. But sometimes
I'm not gonna use him though.
What people don't realize unintuitively is you can end up controlling away the more interesting things. So one counter argument that I've heard to what I've just said that I think there's a great deal of truth to it because when
Okay, I know what I need to do now. I just need to farm. I need to farm like a motherfucker. Going to the rice fields, motherfucker.
But like a counter argument is like, well, hold on. They do have that information. It does count. If they were to administer it, like they can use the government already. I heard. I don't know who. It might have been Medlock. Somebody argued about like we should have universal basic income of $1, just so that everybody is like registered and like payments and distribution.
From me.
Oh, he might have. Maybe he did. Yeah.
During the COVID thing, I was like, here's some lessons from COVID, and one of them was we should have. I said $50 because like you want people to sign up. They do not sign up for $1. We should just have that so that if we need in a pandemic to get the money out, it's so easy to just plug it in. But yeah, no, obviously taking advantage of the government's inherent efficiencies in information collecting, like that's a big thing. And you know, we think that the government is big and efficient, but there are things that it's uniquely able to do. We published this paper at People's Policy Project about I've been fixated on this for so long, and it's so fringe, but the Faroe Islands, which is is part of Denmark. It's a semi-autonomous island chain that's technically part of Denmark, but runs on its own and has its own government and its own institutions. Like 50,000 people live there. What now? They have this tax system that is unlike anything in the world, and the way it works is let's say you're employed, you have an employee.
Who's the legendary Great Sword for?
What do? You have
or is it not gonna show up?
And you might pay it to the state and the federal, and then you give them, and there's this whole thing. And usually,
Beloved Great Sword.
A payroll processing company to do all this. Every time you pay someone, you just give their whole paycheck to the government, and then the government takes out the taxes, and then they also. The government takes out the taxes and then they remit the remainder to the person. So you never have to do any tax withholding. They never have to do any tax withholding. The government knows exactly what you're making in real time. You don't even have to file tax returns.
That's evening.
And then they also, in the process of giving you like your net amount, they also will fold in any of your welfare payments if you have like a child benefit or whatever. So it's all just perfectly integrated, and the government can manage all this. They know exactly what people are making. If there's some kind of unemployment thing that's happening, they see it immediately. Like, it's they're sitting on top of everything, and it's super efficient.
Yeah.
And like, you would never be able to achieve that in the private sector, because the private sector could not compel everyone to like participate in this system, you know.
And even more, because actually I hate this argument, because the microsecond somebody brings up, people say government is so bureaucratic and inefficient, and it's like, what the fuck company do you work for? Like, how many people working for a major company, right, are like, God, like, I love how efficiently we allocate our budgets. I've got like the best management, like the way that we do inventory and we don't waste any money. It's like, come on, like every large system, if you're looking hard enough, it's going to have some amount of waste, some amount of inefficiency or whatever. But I mean, I guess we kind of brought this up or circled around this earlier, that like status quo stuff. One of my biggest complaints, I think it's a huge issue with like liberalism and globalism in general, is it's really hard to see when things are working, but it's very easy to see when something is broken. So yeah, you get these people that's like, oh yeah, the government's fucked up everything and it's, you know, it's all horrible. It's like, you can be in a farm like 30 miles from a fucking city, and you can send a letter in 2 to 4 days from the post office.
I was gonna go with it.
Yeah, there's so many awesome things that our country is able to do seamlessly without you
What am I missing?
about it for a microsecond. You take all of
Horrible
this for granted
bluefin
so
tuna.
much. It is very frustrating. I can go into any
White
restaurant
peach
and order
turnip.
food.
I'm missing
water
2.
fountain. All the water in the U.S. public municipalities, if assuming everything's working, is drinkable and clean. Like
Monster Bone,
yeah.
Lord Lake.
Yeah, no, I use the postal service because there's...
Okay, nothing conflicts. It's literally just marbled bluefin tuna
kind of the wildest,
and
one of the wildest enterprises.
white peach turnip.
I mean, I know there are equivalents with like UPS and FedEx, but they don't cover all the addresses. But like, you compare the U.S. Postal Service to postal services across the world, and just the sheer volume of stuff that they manage is unbelievable.
Don't need creativity.
I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, unless this has changed, or I'm wrong, in which case edit this out.
Don't need
Unfortunately, the Post
courage.
Service is budget neutral, right? They raise all the money through stamps and everything. Yeah.
The Postal Services you could go to their website and they have their books going back to 1793 or whatever it is, which is really, really neat. And over the course of 200 years, they're break even. There was some discussion because for a while, there was a congressional requirement for them to pre-fund their retirement benefits out like 70 years in advance. And so in that period, they would book these like losses, but they were like fake. They weren't real losses. They were like, well, we didn't do the pre-funding. So but if you took out the pre-funding losses, they were break even. So.
Yeah. I guess final econ question. What do you feel about the debt? How should we feel about the debt?
The debt, you know, I'm sure you've heard this many, many times, but like, you don't want to equate sovereign debt to other kinds of debt, whether it's corporate debt or personal debt. It's kind of an instrument of policy, right? And the management of the macroeconomy is mostly what you have in mind. Now, I'm not someone who is like, there's some people, especially kind of like the MMT inflected people, who they want to be like, who cares about the debt? Like, I don't care about it at all. I mean, I have a more kind of old school, conventional, I guess maybe socialist, perspective, which is like, all things equal, I'd rather not be borrowing money that we then have to pay interest on, because that's just another form of capital income. That's what we hate. I don't want the government sending interest payments off to rich people all the time, like in increasing quantities. Like that's what the debt amounts to. Who owns the other end of the debt? It's people who have investable money, which are rich people. So tax the rich, don't borrow from the rich. But when you're dealing with recessions and stuff like that, if you want to
I'm sorry, that was a really good point. I've never thought of that before. That's true. I'm sorry, I've never heard it phrased that way before, but if I have a rich person and I'm the government, I could either say, I need you to give me $10, or can I borrow $10 from you and I'll pay you interest on it in the form of a treasury bond. That's actually incredibly true. That if you're selling debt, that is what's happening at the end of the day, because a lot of people don't understand the connection between like the debt and the treasury or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's me giving you a bond saying like, hey, I'm going to borrow some money from you and I'm going to pay you back a great amount of this time. So if you're somebody that's okay with deficit spending, why would you not be somebody that's okay with a little bit more taxation? Would you really rather give money to rich people than take it from the fund? But yeah, sorry, I cut you off, but I've never heard it phrased that way before.
No, it's... it's hey, I'm trying to, and it's like the long run is the rich wind up with more.
Yeah.
They get the money back plus interest. I'm trying to do the opposite. That's my goal here. But yeah, but you know, in moments of economic crisis and stuff, obviously deficit spending can be a way to boost the economy in a way that even like,
these guys are way lower level than me.
maybe less so, because when you borrow from the rich, yeah, you take the dollar away from them, but then they do have a treasury bond, which they could easily convert back into dollars if they wanted to spend.
Yeah,
so
see,
like,
it's
their
too far.
liquidity is essentially unaffected. So like I get all
bonds
that.
are cash equivalent, aren't they? They're treated as basically.
On corporate balance sheets, they're considered cash. And I mean, yeah, effectively, you can get cash for treasury bonds any day you want. I think we're in the clear. But yeah, I don't know. Like, to me, I'd like to see. I don't really like government debt. I don't see it as like a great progressive virtue, but also it's not like some people have this idea that we're gonna default and the economy's gonna crash and things like that. That doesn't
I feel like it could be. If the I mean, because we have that argument over, because our debt ceiling has to be negotiated, because politicians like to argue about it, and you could say, well, no, we're not going to, and then you just decide to stop paying interest on it.
If you choose to default,
Yeah.
the government decides as a kind of bizarre policy decision, like we're
Like
gonna
global tariffs on every single.
Yeah. But like in that sense, like if you know, it's sort of like imploding your economy by choice. But like you can like Japan has a huge debt. You know, it's like 200% of GDP or something like that. Like these things are manageable. I don't think they're ideal, but again, it's like this idea that, well, the bill's going to come due and you're going to have to pay. It's like, well, you just roll the debt over endlessly. And people, I guess you can imagine, well, creditors are going to start to get worried that the U.S. government's not going to pay interest. Like, I don't know, will they? The U.S. government has always paid interest, but it's the most powerful country in the world. Like, I don't know. People mostly think U.S. government debt is safe, so
Yeah.
it becomes more of like managing interest payments, because there's this quantity, but you never have to pay the quantity back. You just roll it over. So
I think one of the frustrating fiscal realities, I guess two parts, is that one is that if you increase your spending, your government spending, and you don't increase your tax receipts, people will claim that you're just deficit spending to fund the economy, which to some extent is true. But if you just do tax cuts and you don't pair it with any government cuts, like in my mind, you're basically doing the same thing. So I don't like, for instance, that like Trump gets a lot of credit, you know, for his economic policy from 2021, and as all conservatives do. Obviously, he was just like massive deficit spending. He, of course, like people say the economy grew. One, it was already growing under Obama, and two, of course it grew. He ran massive budget deficits. He gave a huge tax cut, and he continued to spend money. What the fuck do you think the economy is going to do? Of course.
right, yeah. A tax cut and a transfer are fiscally identical. They move money onto the household balance sheet, which is then spent. Now it depends on, there's distributive differences, right? Like the tax cut goes to a rich, you know, it's likely to spend and benefit from it. But yeah, no, he ran essentially. He put in place a stimulus right there as soon as he got into office. You know, it had some effects you would think a stimulus would have.
Yeah, it's especially frustrating too, because at a time when he didn't need to. Because people will say like Biden came in and it's like, and Obama. I hate that Democrats come into office having to recover us from worldwide crises, and then people compare that to Trump's administration. It's like, if we should have ever had a budget surplus, right? I feel like it probably should have been under Trump. That would have been the time to do it, you know?
Well, it was, I mean, he wasn't reacting to his crisis. I guess it was sort of, another way to view it, I mean, this is sort of the liberal economist consensus, I think, is that we were still in sort of a long recovery from 2008, because but we saw it, right? Like it wasn't as if he hit a wall on employment or hit a wall on inflation. Like inflation stayed low and employment continued to rise. So there was still room to grow.
But I mean, the economy was, I think from like 2012 to 2013, I think we were doing pretty good. I want to say under Trump, I feel like it was like 22% returns, like year over year over year, like those last 3 years before COVID. Like I feel like think that the economy can run at that level for a long time. I don't know. I'm just saying if you're fiscally conservative,
You mean stock markets?
Stock markets, not GDP. Sorry, yeah, stock markets. Yeah.
Yeah, but the way they view it is, this sort of like basic Keynesianism, right? Is do we have idle workers and idle factories that stimulus could move into production? And it seems like we did, right? Because the employment rate continued to grow. Now, did Trump think about this? Was he like, I'm going to do Keynesian stimulus? Because contrary to a lot of, at the time, maybe some like economic consensus, I don't think we're at full employment. I think there's still room to run.
Sure.
But it turned out that there was room to run, it seemed like.
It's funny you bring up that concept kind of capital deployment too, or like funding things, because I'll argue with people, especially I thought the bad thing was when in 2016 when gamers got involved with politics, because that's when I got involved, and what a horrible time for politics. Yes, but even worse now is the tech bros getting involved in politics. And I argue with so many of these people who are like, it's go back to the gold standard, abolish the Fed, and things will come up relating to like the national debt, and yeah, they're like, the debt is horrible, it's a crime, and I'll ask somebody, it's very funny. You said earlier you didn't compare it to corporate debt. I do. Somebody will say like, the corporate debt is horrible, it's a crime. Like, okay, I'm just curious. Or the national debt. I'll say, what do you think the national debt should be? And they think about it for like a second, and they always say, we should probably be nothing. And then I'll say, especially because I've talked to some of these guys, these are like really successful, like millionaire, billionaire type people, depending on who I'm talking to. And I'll be like, if you were talking to a successful business owner and their business was like doing great and they had absolutely zero debt, what would you say to this person? Obviously, you would say you should take out debt, leverage it, and expand your business. It's a no-brainer. If somebody is operating a profitable business with zero debt, something is wrong because you can leverage it, right? Whatever money I borrow, the time value associated with money, my NPV plus investments, like I can do better if I borrow money, especially in a super low interest rate environment. If I can borrow money at 3% obviously I'm going to make more money on it. So it's interesting that some people view that the national debt is like it has to be zero. It's like, what if we took out some debt and we did more with it with our economy and grew it? Wouldn't that be better? Yeah.
No, I've pushed this before. It's weird. This is where it would come up in the corporate context. It's weird that in the government context, we only look at the one side of the balance sheet, right? We only look at the debt. Why wouldn't you look at the assets as well? Because this came up, I remember back, now I'm really dating myself, back post-2008, there was the Reinhardt and Rogoff paper where it was saying that when you hit 90% of GDP as the debt, the federal debt, that you just hit this like inflection point and like it's going to be terrible for your economy. And I was like, why? I don't understand. What's the deal? And I remember one of the things I thought was, why would it just be debt? What if I took out 90% of debt?
There they are.
And then I just used it to buy a bunch of assets. My position is unchanged. Like I'm still in the exact same fiscal position as I was before, or balance sheet position as I was before. And we never talked about like what is the government assets?
Yeah. Or the economic assets, yeah. Sometimes they'll say it as like a percentage of GDP, but yeah, it's never a full accounting of.
We don't have any. Like, what is the like? If you were to list, add up the public lands, we don't have that. I mean, there have been actually the IMF put out something many years ago. They actually showed that when you bring in all of the government assets as they could count it, that sort of debt minus or assets minus debt, the U.S. was like negative 3% of GDP instead of negative 100% of GDP if you only counted debt. Like, okay. But like in my social wealth fund paper, one of the things I argued, and there've been some countries.
No, actually, don't I have a piece of bread or what is it? It's yeah, it's under items. A piece of bread or something that's supposed to
stimulus or whatever. It's kind of crazy.
Heal me as I move.
Doesn't just borrow and then like buy stock, because if you can get
all party members graduate HP, receive damage.
Turn it around and buy stock, which on average is going to generate 7-8%, and you're a long-term and you're an infinitely lived state.
Right there.
That spread is like free money.
That's funny. That actually sounds a lot like in the corporate world. It sounds like a stock buyback almost. Right, where you've got like your extra money and you don't have any profitable ventures. You're like, fuck it, yeah, like why not buy back stock in a company, or why not buy stock in other companies?
Yeah, or an acquisition.
Yeah.
And that would be very business thinking, right? Like that would be one to be like, let's say you're a corporation that could borrow at 3%. Why wouldn't you do that and then acquire assets that you know are going to generate more than that? Especially when you think about the return on capital is something the government also kind of gets to affect, right? Because it kind of stabilizes the system and gets the economy.
Teleporters.
So.
Is it Canada?
Wondering what all these little circles
Norway
before.
that has a teacher's pension that's supposed to be one of like the most profitable funds in the world. Am I making this up completely?
Profitable.
There's like a pension fund. Yeah, there's like a pension fund that's held by Canadian teachers or something, or maybe it might be one of those Canadian countries. The fact that you haven't heard of this makes me think I'm totally wrong. So, but I feel like the
rate of return, I haven't seen like estimates of that. Norway has the largest social wealth fund in the world.
Sure.
But they have like a certain allocation. They're not. It returns like 6-7%, which is their goal. Like they have a benchmark index. It's like that's what they're aiming for. So, that one's very, very impressive just because of the sheer size of it.
Sure. Although they cheat a bit because they also seem to stumble upon some ungodly amount of natural resources every 10, 20 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that particular fund is fully from they discovered oil in the North Sea, and then they immediately...
Why did it heal? We're literally like all max HP pretty much.
People talk about socialism. They like to focus on like a country like Venezuela.
It was such a waste of a heal.
It's kind of a basket case and whatever. And the things that you think like Venezuelan socialists, not talking about like oil and the PDVSA and like all this kind of stuff, and then I'm like, have you heard of Norway?
Yeah.
Norway found oil in the North Sea and immediately passed a law nationalizing the oil and saying this belongs to the state, and then creating a state-owned oil company to explore it, and then took the return on that oil and created a collective fund that they now all own together. Like, that's more socialist than what Venezuela did. It's just more competently run, So.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything people are gonna be?
How do we get over there?
Anything? Have you seen me give an economic?
There must be a pathway I missed.
Super disagree with,
one thing, people. Are you a means testing guy? Are you one of those guys? I had some people suggested this at certain points.
It's a ladder.
Means testing guy.
Okay.
Although, like, the boring thing is that I feel like after talking to you, I feel like we're probably gonna mostly agree. But like, insofar as people are under the assumption that funds are doled out in like a limited way, and we can't give money to everybody or whatever, I would prefer
like just
funds
staring
allocated as efficiently as possible, and by efficiently to the people that need them most. But like, there are theoretically different types of environments where I wouldn't really care as much. But go ahead.
So because this is a hobby horse of mine, it's like a universal welfare state guy. I think that the people who propose means testing, I think they're literally mostly confused.
Okay.
By like accounting, because the phase out that you use to implement a means test, right? So if you say, oh well, we'll give $1,000 to every kid, but when their family income exceeds $50,000, we will reduce it by $5 per 5% phase out rate, right? That's the same. That is the same thing as a tax equivalent, right? So if we're gonna say every dollar you earn.
Oh no. You or Medlac has made this argument. I hate this argument.
Okay. Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. It has to do with basically as your income increases, you're essentially putting these like really dramatic tax burdens on people because of the negative.
Yeah, that would be like these benefit cliffs, like where the effective marginal tax rate exceeds 100% where you earn money. But I want to say it's important to recognize that when you do a means test based on income, let's say, usually that's done as a phase out.
Sure.
So you'll say, hey, whatever, every dollar you earn over this, we're going to reduce your benefit by 10 cents, and that's how one part. That part where we're reducing your income by 10 cents for every dollar you earn over 50 grand, that's just a tax.
Yeah.
You don't need to implement it as part of the benefit. You can just change the tax code. So a universal benefit, another way to put it is a means-tested benefit can almost always be implemented as a universal benefit where you just take the phase out and you make it a tax instead.
Yeah, so like I said, why I felt it was probably boring. I don't think I necessarily disagree with you. It's just policy-wise, it's a harder sell, I think. Like if I tell some,
it's just a psychological thing. So you're like, people just don't get it.
Like I missed something.
Like if I say that like
there was one path I just didn't bother going down.
Let's say that I have like $100 million for poor people, or I want to like allocate $100 million more to poor people in a state. It's probably an easier sell to say if you qualify at this income, then you get $100 million versus hey, we're going to change the tax code so that like wealthy people pay a bit more here and like poor people get a little bit more here. Like psychologically, I think it's just like a harder sell sometimes for people. But in concept, like in a perfect world where it's just like policy implementation, I don't think I necessarily disagree. I only argue for means testing because
okay, it was this path.
Obsessed with like
because this should be the ladder down to that one item.
Very particular way that like a thing is implemented. I guess.
Sure. So I could see, if you say, look, people have this confusion such that they don't understand. They think of phase outs as reducing spending, right? Because we're not having to waste the money on the rich, and they think of taxes as well taxes.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're the same thing, but psychologically they scan different, and therefore, I mean, that's possible, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
That's what, that's a plausible argument. But I guess I always want to get across the technical superiority of this other approach, because it's not just that you would think, well, if they're equivalent, then why do you care? Well, it matters because when you implement the phase out in the benefit, then that makes the benefit much harder to administer, and it makes it harder for people to sign up, and you end up missing people that you don't want to miss.
Sure.
Because people have to prove their income, file forms, all this kind of stuff. So
can we just walk through just to make sure I understand what you're saying, like a very simple example. And I'm going to do this with harsh cliffs and everything just so I can like conceptualize this. So let's say that I want to give to people that make less than for people that make less than $100,000, I want to give them $1,000. In my means tested world, we would test everybody's income, and then you would get like $1,000, and then once you get to 100,000 in income, you would drop that off. You're saying that in your world, everybody would get $1,000, but once you hit 100,000 in income, you would tax them $1,000 to basically recapture it, and that mathematically, not only is that exactly the same thing mathematically, administratively, it's superior because there's 0% chance.
Wait, what is this then? Principality of Oceania. Is there a beetle here?
Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
You don't have the what they call administrative burden of signing up.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to prove your
Don't
income.
think
and
so.
On the flip side, the thing is like
did do that side
every
quest.
means tested program essentially is a new tax code. People don't think about it like this, but if you have phase outs for SNAP, phase out for Medicaid, we essentially re-implement the tax code. Re-implement a tax code for every benefit, and so you also just
A manner of ascent, southwest of Port Braillehead.
A bunch of bureaucrats who are processing this paperwork.
Manner
so
of
it's
ascent.
essentially duplication.
I don't think that's where I'm at.
Because the way that it's funny if you like tried to sign up for SNAP, you essentially send them the same kind of stuff you send the IRS to pay taxes, and you just have to do that again and again and again, and you have bureaucrats at each one of them. It's like we have a tax code for this.
Yeah.
You have so if you want to think about it like this. We have an institution that can reduce your income. Like, just use that institution to do the income reducing. Don't create 40 different institutions that reduce your income.
Yeah. Yeah, like conceptually, I think I agree. Politically, I could just see the ads of some guy wants to add a new tax onto every single middle class, blah, 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 and that would just be the attack it over and over again. But, like, I understand conceptually.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, I think, yeah. It's funny because
right there.
The way I get into this is the universalists, historically, or one of the big arguments was that the universal program is politically strong, and this was, and it's like, who knows? I don't know. Like, you can see it. Well, everyone benefits, so whatever. And there was these papers that were written that were like, what's interesting is it seems like universal benefits like waste a lot of money, but when you account for the fact that they're politically popular, it actually may be better for the poor to waste some money on the rich and all this kind of stuff. And I just for so long was like, this is totally backwards. Like, the universal program is more efficient because it's more administratively, it's easier to administer, and but it's distributively identical. If you can think about the phase out and the tax, it's the same.
What an incredible
The
find.
political argument is actually on the means testing side.
Ooh, plus
the
5.
Universalist argument, the political argument for the universal benefit was like, yeah, it seems worse, but it's politically potent. It's politically powerful. And I'm like, no, it's better. It's the means testing side that is actually worse, but maybe you can make a political case for it.
So do I sacrifice fire resistance to get +5 stats? I think +5 stats is better than fire.
The same thing, and I think it might work as an example for that argument and against it, and that would be Social Security. I think that Social Security is a strong argument in favor of what you're saying because nobody wants to get rid of Social Security. But I wonder if Social Security would be an argument against it, because if Social Security didn't exist and somebody suggested it today, I feel like it would die immediately. 15.7% tax or 6% whatever on the, like, you think people are going to pay? That's insane, right? I feel like it would just immediately be shut down. So I wonder sometimes, because I think I've seen you tweet, because that was a big, the means testing argument was a really big thing 6 or 7 years ago, and I saw people shooting tweets and papers back and forth, and I saw the universal programs are more defensible, and I see people responding.
I need to get more Magla recovery stuff. I'm so lacking on it.
And I've seen people back and forth on it.
My ass ain't packing.
Yeah, I wonder. I really do like, and I think we need more societal buy-ins. I like taxes on the middle class and the poor, not big ones, but just so that everybody feels like they're part of like paying for something.
Everyone pays. Everyone.
Yeah, so yeah, I like social wealth funds because I like social wealth funds because we're all like invested in our success and we all gain from it. Like I do like those types of things, and I do think that there are a lot of bad writers that come along on the means testing thing where it starts to feel more punitive, and we saw. I don't think it's even argued at this point. Like all of the testing, it's not really means testing, but like drug testing for welfare benefits. There's a waste of money, I think, in every single state where it's implemented. And it starts to feel like people are just, like trying to keep on it, and it's not like well-intentioned, so,
Yeah, all those restrictions. It was one in the better bill that really kind of shocked me, which was that in order to get the child benefits, your parents had to pass an activity test. And, you could pass it by working, and that makes sense, but then it included, okay, if you're not
Is it using items?
Pass it, one of them must be in drug rehab.
Jesus.
Oh, it's using items, and they're just like, such a not good strategy for this. I need to auto fight, or not. I can't auto fight this.
Drug rehab, like, come on, man. That seems a little cruel. Like, let me do my drug rehab in privacy. I don't need to tell all my providers, the people who I buy things from, that I'm in drug rehab. But yeah, stuff like that's really invasive, and that often comes with these kinds of programs. The more targeted it is, the easier it is to impose those kinds of restrictions, because we're invading their privacy, not my privacy. I don't need that. So
There's another way.
All right, well, I can't think of anything else. Fuck, my audience will be real mad.
I thought we're gonna do socialism, be capitalism. It is a little tired, I suppose.
Yeah, I just it's all the standard arguments against like cooperative ownership is really challenging. How do you get people to buy in? Like
the co-ops,
yeah. And I think my most frustrating thing, we said this, I was talking about this off camera before, that people don't acknowledge the pros and cons. Like I think cooperative models solve for the obvious issue of surplus value, because it's obviously goes to the owners, which are the workers. But I think people sometimes pretend that co-ops solve for everything. Like, climate change, we have co-ops that would solve for environmental damage. You're like, no.
Oop, that was a mistake.
The company could conceivably do that.
Yeah.
Or not.
Exactly, yeah. Like if you're a cooperative that does like fossil fuel work, you probably would argue against that a lot, right? Yeah.
Right. What have you, this is an argument I use against the co-op people, which I'm not antagonistic to, but I prefer the social level of ownership is, maybe this will help you, is the profit, the amount of capital income that a firm receives is largely dependent on its capital intensity, and that really may not have anything to do with the workers that are in it. So when you look at like the publicly traded companies, you look at their and you can derive like a profit per worker number, and it varies like fast. So at the top you'll have these real estate investment trusts, these REITs, where they'll have profits per worker that are like $1 million per worker, and then you'll go down to Walmart, it's like $3,000 per worker. Like, well, in a co-op world, the people who work at the REIT now get $1 million extra, and they're like basically property managers. And
this is actually on that topic exactly. That's actually a question I have for if it this is stupid. First of all, there's this group of people I hate them. They're called market socialists, okay? Because I feel like they just want to have.
That's me.
Oh, okay, yeah. You just want to have capitalism, but you want to call it socialism to be cool, okay? But you don't attach a huge number to socialism, so that's fine. Does it count, okay, morally as socialism? Because if I were to create a co-op, where you mentioned the REITs, if I'm a co-op and we're engaging in business with somebody else, aren't we technically eating a whole bunch of surplus value from the people that we're doing business with if we're kind of like repackaging and selling what they do? So if I have a cooperative that's around real estate investment and I'm just buying property from construction people and now I'm like doing something with that to make a whole bunch of money, aren't I just like scraping surplus off of, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like the distribution of surplus across the whole value chain.
Yeah.
I guess that's really a very circumstantial question, like who is getting...
but as you climb up the value add, technically you're...
Yeah, well, this becomes a problem in general. How do you know which part of the node of the chain added how much value? Like, we just assume that whatever they're paid is essentially the value that they added. So if one part of the value chain is getting 50% of the total money that's pumped into it, 50% of the value add. But it could be I did 40% of the value add and I just squeezed some other person. That becomes a very challenging thing. Something similar happens with firm designs are very arbitrary, and like who you employ versus who you contract with in a number of things. So I've used this example before with the tech cafeteria workers. I don't even know if this is true or if it was once true, but you can imagine the Google cafeteria workers are employed directly by Google, in which case they would be members of the co-op and would receive some kind of profit share from Google. Google has very high profit per worker because it's a tech company. But Twitter, right back in the olden days, or I don't know, Facebook, let's say, their cafeteria, they just hire Aramark.
Ooh, nice, thank you.
It's just Aramark with their Aramark workers. Well, those cafeteria workers are not employed by Facebook, so they're not entitled to Facebook dividends.
Yeah.
So, within, like, and you could slice and dice firms in any way you want. Some of it could be outsourced, some of it, so like, it would still be a very arbitrary distribution of the surplus because it would be based on these essentially arbitrary or very malleable firm boundaries.
Yeah.
How much you contract.
That's why I fight a little bit against the Mondragon example. People are like, oh, it's like a 13-to-1 ratio between like the owner and the lowest employee. And I was like, okay, but it's a confederation of co-ops, and these co-ops all have like dramatically different earnings. So like the best co-op, that owner or the top earner there is earning way more than somebody at the lowest co-op. But I mean, all to say, like, whatever, yeah. Two quick questions. I'm guessing you prefer VAT over sales tax?
Yeah.
Damn it.
VAT is easier to collect and is more imperceptible, so.
Okay, and then second question, the Georgists. Are you a big land value tax guy? You know, the Georgists are very annoying people on Twitter, at least they were back in the day. Yeah.
But that does not preclude the fact that, yes, it is true that the return on space, which we call land, but maybe it's better understood as space, that space is not created, and yet there is a return on space. People pay someone for space.
Medic Greaves. That could be good.
That seems illegitimate. Even aside, now the socialist is going to say the return on all this stuff, whether it's created or not, is illegitimate. But you can reach a George's conclusion without reaching the overall socialist conclusion and say there's something specific about space and natural resources, which they'll bring in as well. The returns that people generate on space and natural resources are a classic case of reaping where you do not sow. Use the Adam Smith line.
Collecting rents, I guess.
Yeah, it's just pure rent, you know. And like people make improvements, but we can distinguish between like this building we're in right now. Obviously, the building was constructed, and there's some return on the building, but the building also sits on land that's right by like beautiful body of water and like that.
I love how it's just he's always hungry, eternal hunger, gluttony.
Certainly, the owner of the plot of land didn't create it. Yes, they're generating this return, and so that there's like definitely a moral or normative sense of like, even if you're not a socialist and you're just someone who thinks like, look, people should only get they should be paid for what they produce.
I think I visited everything.
Capital income.
Oh, it's not going to show me the dungeon.
All this kind of stuff. No one produces the rent of the
Fine.
land. Now, then there's a practical question of how do you collect that? Like, can you just essentially say, well, look, I think the market value of the rent for this land, if it was fully unimproved, would be X each year, and we'll just impose a tax equal to that. That does seem to, in theory, be correct. Like, you could do that. It wouldn't cause distortions. People would still pay that rent because they could then erect the building on it and get a return from the building. The tricky part comes in with who makes the decision of what the unimproved rents are.
Well, it's Boop's day. I gotta go to the bathroom.
Because people won't even value current businesses or buildings like proper. Like Trump had a whole tax thing over. Did he value his property?
Well, it's a political thing, and it's also like.
Maria, do we have pictures for you?
Empirically.
We do not. I'm sorry.
How do I know? I mean, it was an unimproved plot of land that was nearby that was sold recently, and I can kind of use that as.
I think I'm gonna try to talk to some NPCs today.
And so it becomes really more of just like something you administer, a way to like assess this rent. Which I'm fine with as well, but it, that's where it can get a little bit. You're moving outside of theory, and going into practice. And when you go into practice, you're not detecting or observing or discovering the rent of the land. You're just dictating what the rent of the land is, and that does actually happen. Obviously, with property values, we have to give these like assessed values of property in order to do property.
Actually, no. I might be able to do.
There's research on that.
I don't know if they care about the bad weather, but I could maybe do the gauntlet.
People actually, that they under assess rich people's property.
Is there anything I want to buy? I don't know.
Well,
okay, we're gonna check the stores. Check to see if there's anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can just explicitly
turn in,
that if you want.
and then we'll check the Coliseum.
We'll say, well, look, if we can bring the land into public ownership, then we don't have to worry about assessing the tax. It's sort of like the same thing as
They're pretty fucking strong.
Worry about trying to collect the corporate tax because we just receive the dividend and the return directly.
Sure.
And I mean, Singapore did this. The state in Singapore owns 90% of the land. So that's the George's paradise. They also built 80% of the apartments. The state in Singapore. So. Now, it's got other problems, I would say, but it proves that you can do that if you really want to, so.
All right. Well, hey, listen, I appreciate you coming on a chat. If people want to find you, and if you want to promote something, what do you got?
Yeah, we got peoplespolicyproject.org, we got nlrbedge.com, and you can follow me on Twitter @MattBruni.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And, hopefully we don't get into huge fights on Twitter in the future or whatever, yeah?
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
I don't remember when they started adding a little piano bit at the
Ground
end.
News
That was a
puts
cute
it back together,
exit thing.
so you can see how many sources are reporting on any breaking story, where they fall on the political spectrum, how reliable they are, and who
Okay,
owns them.
Hulkenberg, she needs
Compare
Elemental
headlines
Master.
and read full articles to see which details are
Okay, thankfully
prioritized,
she can get that.
exaggerated, or left out entirely. Because the more we understand the media, the more we'll understand each other. Visit ground.news to learn more.
I wonder if it'll autoplay to another video. Because if it does that, that's pretty convenient. Because there's a lot of these kind of podcast things I need to catch up on.
To greater heights.
It doesn't look like it. Okay. What? Oh no, it will. Okay. I do not want... No, I don't want to listen to John Oliver. No, thank you. What is something I want to listen to? Is there anything interesting going on right? No. Looked at a Possible live stream? No. Good conversations, or let me see. Can we trust Walmart capitalism to keep us safe? At Doom Scroll Podcast. Feeding casinos, refusing IDs, gambling on YouTube. Black conservatives in America. Smallest dishonest use of race in the election. Drinking in North Korea, corruption, and Stalin is failing in the need for political action. You know, actually no, this looks like a good, because I've been meaning to listen to him, which is Flint Dibble. Actually, I don't know. I think it'll be better if I listen to this other. Oh, they've had Flint Dibble twice. I'm gonna listen to this one. Like this one just seems like it would feed into the other conversation nicely.
All of it is a pipeline that leads into conspiracy. And if you believe in one conspiracy, chances are you're going to believe in a lot more. And it's really not long when you start going down these rabbit holes that, like, you know, it's like, oh, you know, the pyramids were built by aliens. And then like, oh, someone's covering it up.
There were studies coming out that the more you deplatform these people, they go to Gab and then they just get more extreme over there. To what extent have like we created the problem, or is it they're no chicken and egg?
When I was 16, I was like fully on the alt-right pipeline. Like it was early stages, but I was absolutely in it. I don't think that Graham Hancock is racist. I'm sure there are people who will argue with me on that, debate me on that, but the theory of Atlantis and things like that have roots in racist theory.
You're careful what you put into your body. What Joe Rogan supplement did you just buy? Yeah, get out of here, right? I don't trust the experimental vaccines, but you better believe I love those monoclonal antibodies. Like
most people with anxiety don't have crazy conspiracy theories that they believe in.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't be surprised to find out that most conspiracy theorists have high anxiety.
What's this do? Medium HP recovery.
You know, I am one of the archaeological
cabal
being paid by the Smithsonian to lie to you, which I wish I was. I'm a Google debunker.
Elon Musk is
a little bit
who George Soros.
Why not? I can like almost interact with this.
Was supposed to be.
It's just a pretend play or like sound option thing. I have an audio control setting here. Sound setting. Not that one. I want just audio. Yes.
He's a foreigner who bought a publicly traded social media platform. He took it private by using foreign money to purchase it, and now there's no transparency into it. And he posts all of his far-right public opinions on the platform in a way that no other large social media.
Like we are, ironically, we're actually falling into the exact same trap. That's really the problem with this. Is we're not even talking about archaeology anymore. The last of it has just been politics and psychology and the way that like radicalization works and stuff.
Hello everybody, welcome to Bridges. We are joined today by Milo. He is a YouTuber who does archaeology, debunks conspiracy. I think I saw environmental scientist on the list there somewhere too.
You sure did, yes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
And your channel is Minuteman.
Yes, my channel is Mini Minuteman. So, that's correct. My name is Milo Rossi. I'm an archaeologist, environmental scientist, and science communicator. I work primarily on YouTube. Most of what I do is discussing archaeology, Earth history, and natural science topics, but probably the thing that I'm the most well known for is discussing and debunking pseudo-archaeology, pseudo-history, and various conspiracy theories. So,
is this an archaeology coded uniform right now?
Did he give up on exploring and took over the church?
I know I am repping some of my own merch at the moment. I have my Cave of Swimmers pendant, but other than that, I think I accidentally, Indiana Jones has just bled into my fashion sense. So
just really like linen.
Yeah, exactly, linen. There's something about the texture, linen and leather.
Feels free and thoughtful. Yes.
What got you into archaeology?
Archaeology I consider as being kind of one of my oldest interests. So one of the very first things I can remember being really interested in as a kid was Otzi the Iceman. So when I was about, I think between 4 and 5 years old, I found an issue of National Geographic that talked about him. For those of you that don't know, Otzi is a more than 5,000-year-old ice mummy found in the Italian Alps. He is the oldest wet mummy ever discovered, and he is an amazing window
large
into
HP
what
recovery.
life was like for, kind of Bronze Age Europe.
What's a wet mummy? Sorry?
A wet mummy is a mummy that has been preserved in a wet environment. So
I think we'll just equip that on my main guy.
Like an icy environment. So where you think of, the mummies in Egypt, those are dry mummies where they've been desiccated. So a wet mummy, in the case of Otzi being, mummified at the foot of a glacier, the museum he's kept in right now, he has to be kept at, I can't remember what the temperature is, something super low.
No, actually, I'm fine with her having it done.
Humidity, or else he would just
she'll be tanking majority of the time, presumably.
So it's a pretty unique discovery, but I was really fascinated by it. He has some of the oldest tattoos in the world, and I remember, being really interested by him when I first saw him. Maybe it's that morbid curiosity, and my dad took me to the library, and we printed out all the articles we could on the proto-internet, and I remember him reading them to me and highlighting things, and that was really what kicked it off. My family is originally from northeastern Pennsylvania, so there's a lot of coal mining there, and so some of my first experience kind of actually in the field was going there and finding all these fossils and shale piles. So these are dating back to the Carboniferous period, a little more than 300 million years ago. So not exactly archaeology, but something that really piqued my interest in history, natural history, and really the history of this planet.
The first things I found were 400 million years old, so,
Damn it.
I'm from Nebraska, not that impressive.
One thing I noticed, you're one of the few people that when I watch the YouTube channels, I don't typically bump up the speed.
Yeah, it's probably just because of how fast I talk,
Yeah. Well, exactly. Right? Most people I'm like, oh,
Jesus,
drive me crazy.
Yeah. I know, that's something I have to remind myself. I'm like, Milo, slow the hell down, so.
Do you, your path through school, your PhD'd or?
Not yet, but I'm working towards that. So right now, I currently just hold a bachelor's. Okay. So I attended the University of Maine, Orono. I originally went there for environmental science. So I have been interested in archaeology my whole life. I kind of consider myself as kind of having been studying it for my whole life in one degree or another. But when I went to high school, I went to a vocational high school, and there I was able to pick a major, a concentration, and I went with environmental science. So by the time I graduated high school, I had about 4,000 hours of experience in environmental science, and ended up pursuing that as my primary major when I went to college. Only after starting it and having a very inspiring teacher there did I kind of rekindle my passion for archaeology, and ended up adding that to my degree as well. So in the future, I do want to continue going for that and achieve some higher education in it, but right now I'm, my first 2 years out of college, so that's where I'm at right now.
How do you balance the desire to do academic work versus doing YouTube stuff? Not that the YouTube work isn't academic, but
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that's something that is, it's definitely challenging.
See, maybe I should just do that other dungeon first.
New part
it's
of
the very
space.
last one.
One of the reasons that I was sort of steered away from doing archaeology as a major by my, high school advisor and some of my other advisors was because like, oh, well, you need to get like a PhD before you can do literally anything. So like, it's not even really worth like spending the time. You already have experience in environmental, so just do that. So I'm in this unusual position now where, with the experience that I do have, I have been able to make a really large splash in the archaeology space, and so that was something that
I want to check out the
having,
Midnight
sort of
Store
PhD and things like that. So every time I've talked to
Actually,
former professors,
wait, does this guy have anything
mentors, and other people in the archaeology world, they're like, "You're killing it. Just whatever you're doing, just keep doing that." So I think that when it comes to actually pursuing that higher education, right now I have a strong enough head of steam that I want to continue doing this, and I do anticipate going back at some point to really just be able to further my understanding and to be able to just develop my network a little bit. But right now, I feel like I'm far from the ceiling of what I'm working on right now with YouTube.
Do you think other people in your field or in the higher education space ever feel resentful or express that in regards to your popularity being on YouTube and not, Yeah,
that's a good question. I was worried they would be, but I honestly have not found that at all. If anything, I feel like it's been kind of the opposite. People have been thrilled to see that there has been a lot of interest in the archaeology world, and there's been so much interest in my channel. I mean, something that archaeology has had a challenging time doing, I think, is really being able to engage effectively with a pop audience.
Well, at least the dog
which is
found
why
you home.
archaeology and things like that end up becoming so popular, because the academics can have a really hard time translating a lot of their topics beyond the field of a classroom or other scholars. And so most of what I've found is pretty much every professional I've talked to has been over the moon at the response and reception that my channel has been getting.
Does that make it easier if you're like, I don't know if you're in Masters, but applying for Masters, can you like cite your YouTube channel as like, I wouldn't say because it's not academic work precisely, and I don't know what the application for the master's process would be for archaeology, but there's some level of overlap between obviously your channel and experience that otherwise people get in research and reading topics and doing lit reviews and stuff. I imagine every time you do a video, you're doing a certain amount of lit review.
That's what I need.
And you do a lot of citations as well. I'm not sure which style. Is it APA or Chicago?
Well, since I'm not doing too much writing, most of what I do is I'll just have on-screen citation of reference number, and then I'll have that referenced in the description with links so that you can go to those papers yourself. So it's a little different than publishing.
So you wouldn't show that off to your prof?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, can you utilize any of that? Because that's a really interesting area. I've had a couple of like psych people as well mention to me, being like, do you think if I had like a psych YouTube that did well, I could like include it in my application? And so far I've been like, I probably wouldn't, but
wait, do I have outfits I can equip?
Absolutely. I think that looking at what I have
done
in the last few years, I am immensely proud of it. It has garnered a very large reception and very good reception from a lot of people in the archaeology world who are thrilled to see these topics being communicated to millions of people. And so I think those numbers sort of speak for themselves, where I do put my best foot forward of research that I do, making sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's, even when I slip up, making sure that I am able to correct those mistakes, and working with as many professionals as possible who do have more experience in the field, so that I'm using my platform to elevate what they've worked on as well. So something that I really try and do is, as fun as it is to do my debunking content and sort of be the punchy snarkyologist, something that I really try and focus more on is I've really been trying to focus more on talking about topics that are less related to conspiracy. So actually talking about real archaeological topics, bringing other professionals into the fold. I've done work at the Penn Museum. I've been on site in Göbekli Tepe, at Karahan Tepe. So I've been places that are actual resume builders and sort of working in archaeology beyond just kind of standing in a room talking about it and making jokes and drinking a beer. So
okay, yeah. So you can kind of cite it. I'm super curious because a lot of people. We talked a little bit with Flint about this, but talking about essentially like an expert and like what makes an expert. I imagine you must get a number. Do you get a lot of criticism of being like, you're not even an archaeologist, like you don't have a PhD, anything like that, or because you're citing so strongly, maybe it doesn't.
The only people that I ever get that from are pseudo-archaeologists who have even less credentials. So it water off my back.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Why do you think there isn't this like appeal to authority that essentially like you technically don't have without the PhD and stuff? Why do you think people don't mind that? Do you think it's a descriptor of the field, or do you think people understand essentially they can kind of respect research regardless of like the level of lettering behind somebody's name?
I think that it would be something like that. So kind of what you said there, where I do have experience in the field. It's also not like I have not done anything in archaeology, like I've never taken a class in it, and I'm speaking as an authority figure. So I have experience in archaeology. I did study it, and I've been interested in it.
What is the point of this?
And because of that, I have a basis of knowledge, a foundation of knowledge that I apply to my work.
The
So
gift
even
from
when we were getting
Fidelio,
ready
it was
for this
in
video and you were asking about those pyramids that were up there, I have no problem saying I don't know about those pyramids. I didn't study Egyptology.
Or is that just like the
Egyptology is
base
not something I'm
outfit
super
for the
passionate
characters?
about, and so
You know,
I'm
I
not
bet if I
gonna
had
act like I'm an authority
DLC,
figure in that field. And
I could
people
swap
trust
it
that
out. That's
because I'm
probably
not
what it
willing to
is.
step beyond what my base of knowledge is to try and act like I know something that I don't. And that's really, I think, where the credential problem becomes an issue when it comes to pseudo-archaeology, is I don't think that there's anything wrong with people not having PhDs having a voice in the field. In fact, I think that's something that's really important because it makes it feel like it's something that's accessible to everyone. Like it makes people watch and be like, oh, I can actually do that. Like they'll listen to me. But when you get, a lot of these pseudo-archaeology people who don't have any credentials, they are not like, posing theories and like, kind of like putting, a couple ideas out there. They are speaking as if they are a greater authority figure than people who actually do have experience in it. So what I do is I'm not, going out and being a rogue, doing like my own digs and trying like publish my own faked papers. I am using my base of knowledge and understanding, analyzing the papers that have already been published by other professionals in the field, and being able to use my understanding to convey that knowledge to a broader audience.
Yeah.
I don't think people actually ever care about the authority. I think it's more what it's doing, because like when it comes to misinformation, people are so excited when they can cite a single doctor or a single PhD that will support whatever dumb stuff they believe in. But when they don't have that person, well, I mean, it's academia. It's all bought and paid for, or it's all rigged anyway, so who cares? So people are very quick with the whether they agree with authority or they don't agree with authority.
But I love how I think, squeegee heroes are. I don't know how to describe it.
Okay, well, what about the fact that 99% of doctors disagree with him? Okay, well, actually, authority sucks. Like, okay.
Yep.
I
Are
also
there
think there's
source here I'm missing?
I think there's a huge issue with oh shoot, I just had this and I read something different. Sorry, God.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And, you know, that's kind of a fallacy that I think we see a lot when it comes to this field, is that idea of that hasty generalization, where you see it a lot in pseudoscience, pseudoarchaeology, where, you know, like, oh, well, you know, this one scientist said this thing, or like this researcher said this thing, well, then like everyone else is wrong. Or like, you know, big archaeology is all saying this one thing, well, they're bought and paid for, you know? And so like, it really is a kind of challenging conversation to even have. And I've thought about it, you know, a lot, doing what I do, like working with the people that I work with, and like I don't even really have a perfect concise thesis on, you know, expertise and credentials. I think it's very important, but
yeah, I was gonna say on the credential part, the most painfully obvious time for me when I'm realizing that the whatever credentials somebody's citing are bullshit, whether they have them or not, is when somebody cites their credentials. I think it is one of the most annoying. I've run into this so many times where somebody will just start rattling off like, oh, well, I'm PhD'd in, you know, XYZ. Okay, we'll demonstrate that. Like, my background is kind of art. I did music in school for 3 years. Everybody that does any kind of art, when you're going into a school, you audition. Nobody cares what you scored on your final recital, but you have to play an audition piece. And I imagine it's probably the same for photography or for acting or anything else. You probably have an acting audition, or you probably have a portfolio or whatever. And the idea that I just can't ever imagine being in a debate with somebody or an argument, or you're trying to debunk something, and you're like, well, actually, I'm right because I've read this book. And it's like, okay, well, summarize it for us. Like, are you gonna go ahead and say something about it, rather than just like, nebulously citing off to either a degree or a piece of work that you can't remember any part of? That's such a frustrating thing to deal with.
I think that's a really good point, and that really is, you know, kind of the crux of it, is that like you lead by example, where it's like, you know, I could get up there and say that I have a PhD and then just spout some bullshit. Like, you know, and that's obviously not what a lot of people are doing. Science is supposed to be a self-correcting field where, you know, you work to get a PhD and you earn it because it is something where like you have had to go through the hurdles in order to make sure that you are doing good science. So it obviously is a good system, a system that can be taken advantage of, and there are people who are in it who maybe don't deserve it, but by and large, I think it's a very well, you know, done system. But, you know, again, as I kind of said earlier in this, the only people that have ever, you know, attacked credentials or anything like that are people who are in the pseudoarchaeology world. And that's because I think they just have a very flawed understanding of, you know, what academics need to hear in order to listen to it, where they do think that like, oh, well, like if you don't have a PhD, then, you know, no one's actually going to listen to you and your point is moot, which is ironic when they don't even listen to people that do have PhDs.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish the dungeon because I'd rather get all my allies ranked up.
It's a whole bit of a mess, but at least that's kind of the way that I view it.
Yeah, they'll act like it's just a big PhD circle jerk, and like a lot of these guys, especially like in philosophy, like people make a whole career just writing papers back and forth to each other, arguing. Card and Morehouse have been arguing about immigration and minimum wage for, you know, 20 years. It's like people will do these things forever, but yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite things about YouTube, like coming from a more traditional academic background, is that like even within, maybe this hasn't been your experience, but within my experience, there was like kind of that elitism of the letters, right? Where it's like, well, if this person has more letters than you, they're obviously just like better at all the things. And it's like, well, it's a pretty good heuristic to assume that they're more informed. That would make sense. They've probably done twice as much school as you. But the issue is you can find a PhD to say anything, right? There's a PhD. Not all PhDs are the same. Definitely not all PsyDs are the same, right? And so it's really, really important to understand, especially with YouTube and just with the amount of information that people have at their hand.
Oh, I can do Alonzo.
Understanding what a PhD
I have so many people I need to talk to and hang out with.
But like the epistemic groundwork that was built into somebody with like a doctorate of philosophy, right? Because a really core component of probably any field of research.
Chamber.
You can maybe speak outside of just my field, but is learning what is pseudoscience, what's the research method,
martial
artists, hypothesis, what's basic science, what's applied science, like all these really fun. How do you think about like
he's the big one now.
Conflicting data. How do you think about
because I want to unlock Trickster.
I'm running on like low brain juice right now, but basically when there's like an extra variable that maybe
Grifter's Eye is actually really good
data, too. I don't know why I can't think of the word. It starts with C, but anyways,
we'll go hang out with Alonzo.
Aware of all of these little issues that you need to be thinking about.
Confounding variable.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I wasn't remembering that. I was like, I know it's a C, but I just want to say conflict, and that's not it. And I feel like that's like one of the most important things that kind of gets lost in the age of information is the really fundamental groundwork of not just what the info is, but how to think and engage with the information that you're learning.
That is a really excellent point. You summed it up really well, and I think to build off that a little bit is science is a language. You have to be taught to speak it. And that's something that isn't meant to sound gatekeepy of like, if you didn't go to college, you can't be a scientist, because that's just absolutely not true. Anyone who tells you that is completely full of it. But the issue is that there is sort of a level of experience that you need to have to be able to process, say, a scientific paper or something like that. I mean, I'm sure that all of us have lost track of the amount of times we have seen scientific papers just completely bastardized, taken out of context. You find that one study from some, you know, BS thing from a long time ago that, you know, backs up the thing you're trying to say, but it says PhD on it, so you go for it. Science is, you know, it's supposed to be self-correcting. It's supposed to have a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure good information is put out there, but it all comes down to the person interpreting it. And a lot of pseudoscientists and pseudo-archaeologists are people who don't have a large formal training in the scientific world, and because of that, they have a sort of flawed approach to actually like understanding and comprehending these papers. And so that's why I really think that like you don't need a PhD to bat in this space. You just need some experience in like science, even if that's your own learned experience. I know creators who, you know, bat hugely above their weight in the archaeology space online who are high school dropouts, and they're amazing, and they make great content that is, you know, as I said earlier, dotted the I's, crossed the T's. They're amazing. They have the backing of actual PhD'd archaeologists and stuff like that, because they actually put in the effort and they care enough to look through these papers. I find that my experience with science of the last 8, almost 9 years of my life doing it formally, I have been able to kind of learn how to speak that language, and really it's my ability to, you know, look at scientific papers, to analyze them well, to be able to identify what's good and what isn't, that gives you the most leverage in being able to make sure that you're putting good information into the world. I think another thing that people don't really think about a lot is when it comes to that like PhD and all that, a PhD is really specific. Like I, you know, went to school and, you know, I was in my my paleoecology class. Fascinating class. It was really interesting, really inspiring, talking about the ecology of New England after the end of the last ice age. We can look at bog samples, you know, core samples that show the pollen layers that fell into the bog year after year, so you can see how trees migrated north as, you know, like the rocks slowly began to get covered with moss and ferns and all this. And as we were talking about that, we were looking at papers that were written by people who have their PhD purely in like, you know, I think they're called like pollen sporophytes or something like that, and like that's it. So would that person who, like, if I had a degree in pollen sporophytes and talked about all the exact same things I do right now, would people take me more seriously because I say PhD? So that's obviously not to discredit someone who has a PhD. They know more about pollen sporophytes than I ever will, and I will consult them to be able to learn what they have learned. But having a PhD does not give you a, in my opinion at least, a much larger general base of knowledge than if you had gone for your bachelor's or even your master's. A PhD is really to narrow it down on something and that it's diminishing returns to the entire field, in my opinion. Maybe that's a hot take, but that's kind of the way that I view it.
Yeah, it makes me think of, there's that quote, like, jack of all trades, master of none. I think the full quote is like, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but I prefer a jack of all trades than a master of one, or something like that, right?
Yes.
This idea of, like, essentially, it feels like, especially in North America and probably Europe as well, there's been this increasing fixation on specialization, because specialization, especially as your population grows, leads to high efficiency, right? If you've got one guy who's really, really good at making switches, all you want that guy to do in a system that's efficient is to make amazing switches.
Make me the best damn switch.
Best damn switches ever. But now in like the era of information where people are accessing more and more info, it feels like we need to kind of go back and go, how do you build a good jack of all trades? Like, how do you build a generalist who's good at thinking about the world in a generalized way and kind of applying a good epistemic system that can apply across the sciences while acknowledging you're not an expert in any of them, and knowing like when and how to go to the experts to fill in all of the information that you're missing in between.
Yeah, and having that diversity of understanding, I think, is super important. I remember when I was kind of in college and I was beginning to, you know, add archaeology to my field and things like that, I was kicking myself for not picking a school based on archaeology and picking one based on environmental science, and I kind of grudgingly went through it. And in hindsight, I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad that I went for environmental science and that I added archaeology after, because I love environmental science and really I love natural history. And me studying environmental science had given me such a wonderful breadth of knowledge for understanding natural history. And that's something that, like, for example, one of my most recent videos talking about the Green Sahara, Like, that is a video that talks for maybe about like 10 minutes of its almost hour runtime about archaeology. The rest is talking about natural systems, climate systems, the way that like the Milankovitch cycles affect the weather patterns. I wouldn't have that expertise if I had not gone to school for that, and if I hadn't been kind of taught in that base of knowledge of it. So like, I really do think that having a, there's a reason I don't just call myself an archaeologist or an environmental scientist. I'm kind of both. I have, I don't want to put myself in a box because I think that I have a really wide range of not only expertise, but also interest. And I don't want to talk about just one thing yet. Like, a major reason I haven't decided to go for my PhD is not only that I feel like I'm really like, excelling in this kind of brand new space of, the classroom that is, the internet, but also because I don't know what I'd want my pollen sporophytes to be yet. I don't know what that one thing is that I really want to focus in on. I've thought about, this would still kind of be archaeology, but, a little bit different. I've thought about doing something, with conspiracy and pseudoscience. I think that there's a real place to be able to like approach that from a purely like academic standpoint and do like a PhD in like combating pseudoscience and understanding the psychology of what makes people like, fall into these traps. So I haven't, crossed that threshold yet, but it's something I'm definitely thinking about.
Have you looked into like meta science then at all? Because
Honestly,
what you're
not
talking
really.
about, I had a supervisor that was his specialty was pseudoscience actually.
Meta science, explain that to me.
So meta science is like it's like a new branch of science. It's the study of science itself.
Oh, interesting.
It's amazing.
Wow,
so
meta science, I get it. Okay.
Yeah, but it's basically like one meta scientist. There's actually a meta scientist in Tampa that is in psychology, and his research is focused exclusively on comparing self-reports to EEGs, like brain EEGs, to basically look at like action spike potentials and stuff to kind of create basically like a software system that can more biologically based self-reports, because self-reports are like the greatest bane of psychology because it's all we use, and also they're kind of garbage a lot of the time. They're really rough, right? And so that's like a form of meta science, is like it's analyzing the science and practice itself. So a lot of I think the amyloid plaque guy who found that the amyloid plaque theory was just false for the last like 13 years in Alzheimer's. I think he's a meta scientist as well, which sounds like might interest you. I don't know if there's an archaeology meta science version, but I'm sure there is.
Get back to me in a couple years, maybe there will be.
Yeah, you can make. Hey, honestly, there's lots of people. Jonathan Haidt basically just made his field of psychology, so why not?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you fall into a trap of being too destructive instead of constructive when you're talking about archaeology? Like, are there ever times where you're like, man, wasting time on debunking conspiracies is not very fulfilling? I wish I was talking about like cool aspects of archaeology instead of just, fighting with people. What percentage of your content like even is the debunking stuff?
I absolutely fall into that trap. That's something that has been really challenging for me. I love what I do. I love doing my debunking. It's really the thing that kind of, gained me notoriety in the beginning. And it's really fun. But the difficulty with that is the moment you bring an individual into it, it, kind of turns into a boxing match. And, if somebody doesn't agree with you in the beginning and they think you're kind of an asshole, they're not going to agree with you by the end, no matter how many papers and sources you've presented them with. And that's something that I am keenly aware of. And that's why I try and do a little bit of a two-pronged approach. I talked about this in the talk that I gave at Virginia Tech, how the two sort of approaches I try and take is debunk that pseudo-archaeology, debunk that pseudoscience, but also to just focus videos on teaching actual science and actual archaeology and actual history. Because I think that the greatest tool that scientists have to combat pseudo-archaeology and pseudoscience is to teach the actual truth of it and get out ahead of the pseudoscientists, because once a general population has been able to understand and digest these topics for themselves, they'll be a lot less susceptible to falling for it in the future. It's a lot easier to give people the tools they need to identify pseudoscience so they don't fall for it in the first place than it is to change their minds once they've already been convinced of it and sort of radicalized with it.
So it's like inoculation almost.
Exactly. So that's a really challenging thing. And then kind of the flip side of that coin is it's also a hard thing to do, because in the creator space, as I'm sure you know, people love a dogfight. And so it's really challenging when I'll put, a lot of work into a video that does just kind of talk about
nice. I finally got really good
science or archaeology, and there's
scrolls.
no, controversy in it, because it just simply
Let's
doesn't
get
do
like
it.
10 of each.
And that's a really challenging thing when, your money is based on views.
Yeah. When people are engaging in misinformation around archaeology, what do you think are some of the critical thinking errors that they're committing? Why do you think people fall into these traps?
Ooh, that is an excellent question. There's a few of them. I think probably one of the largest.
Oh, that's only the one.
I was going to write it down earlier.
Yeah, those are a bit of a waste.
I think that there's a couple. One is Strawman.
Reduced
Strawman is
icon
classic, but it
cuff.
happens a lot of people, you know,
Really
saying
good, especially
that, like,
with the
oh, well,
Prince
if you think
archetype.
this, then you must think this thing. Like, you know, oh, you're saying that, like, by criticizing pseudo-archaeology, you're saying that we need to silence
like the Prince
it and
archetype
ban
is
it, and,
almost
like,
always
you're
gonna use
silencing
synthesis
freedom of
skills.
speech, which is like, no one's saying that. I'm just doing your research for you. That's, you know, a completely different thing. I also think that there's the you know, hasty generalization fallacy that I kind of brought up earlier, where, you know, people are very quick to be like, here is, like, you know, a time when science was wrong, and therefore, you know, all of
really
science is wrong, which sort of brings it into
Wait, I
you know,
didn't
this
want to buy
idea
that.
that
Fuck.
There
or
is
equip it.
almost a comparison to be made between actual scientific theory and, you know, pseudoscience. Like, both of them have an equal chance of actually being correct. I'm handling this in the upcoming video that I'm doing on my response to Philip Ziba, where one of the things he says is, you know, like, oh, well, I talk about, you know, space facts and things like that. And then I also talk about, you know, the theory that, you know, the pyramids might have been a power plant. And at the end of the day, both of those are just theories, which, like, is such a, you know, it completely flattens it. It flattens both of the arguments to a point
such a
where
huge
now it doesn't
upgrade.
mean
Holy
anything
shit.
anymore. Where, like, yes, I guess
Wait, does it also work on
technically
other
both of
people's
those are
archetypes?
theories, but one of them is a very well-supported scientific theory with papers
No.
backing it up.
Okay.
It ties
That's all I
into
need to know.
different parts of
Still
science, and the
really
other
strong.
one is a thing that some guy said and wrote in a book somewhere. So by claiming that those things are equal to one another, you're muddying the waters so much that there's no longer a distinction to be made, which kind of hurts everyone.
It's very frustrating. We're covering a lot of topics that we did earlier, but the way that people are incorrect on something is so instructive for what is going on in their mind. Like, and I think people intuitively know this, but their mind gets a little bit, I don't want to say rotted, but their mind can be very poisoned against an idea if it's not advantageous for them to believe it for some other reason, for something unrelated to the topic. But the idea of, like, how a person...
Let us pause that. Swap over my audio, because this is probably going to be a talking segment, because it's her final event.
Thank you. So much. I didn't gather you here just to hand out free money. I did it to help you find good work. Because, see, if you find good work, you don't need to depend on other people. And that means you've got no one dragging you along. You decide how you want to live, and you make the most of it. So let's hear it. Want to live on your own terms? I'm sure the answer's pretty clear. We can get there, one step at a time. And today, right here, is your first step.
A pretty speech, no doubt. But who's gonna hire a parapets?
I can answer that. Where I work, there's an old man who said if Katharina vouches for them, he'll hire them. No questions asked.
Sure, but we don't have the skills for a workshop like that.
I know. That's why we're going to get you some proper schooling.
We're going to erect a facility right here and hire a teacher who'll show you how to read and write and perform calculations. You can also learn carpentry, needlework, or medicine. And once you've the skills, we can talk to workshops and trade associations.
I don't care about any of that. I say just give us money. Sounds like a right pain in the arse. There's gotta be a faster way than all that.
You think handouts are going to keep you alive? If everyone sits in the cart and no one pulls, would you just sit in the mud till you die?
Oh, come off it. We take what we're owed. It's that easy. Besides, you were the one saying we'd steal it back from the rich.
You can do this. Keep going.
Yeah, I did say that, but I wasn't right. And for that, I'm sorry. Something stolen is just gonna keep getting stole. You'll start to fear and resent your neighbour. It's an endless cycle of misfortune. How can anyone take pride in living off someone else's work stolen by force? I couldn't. No, we can't steal our way to a good life. We gotta shape our reality with our own two hands. We welcome anyone who wants to be their own change. Here, together, we write our own futures.
Do you think it's possible that I could be a leather worker?
And I want to try making clothes. I mend all my family's garb, and I'm pretty good at it.
I love teaching kids. If I dedicate myself to study, might I be a teacher as well?
What's gotten into all your heads?
All your bloody heads.
Bloody talk about change. Too late for me, I say.
Not by half. So tell me, what do you want to do? We can work on this together.
Always thought it'd be nice to see the ocean. Thought that since I was a kid.
Then learn how to do calculations. If you can do that, I can introduce you to a merchant in Brylehaven.
This is really taking off. It's gonna take me a while to get through all these people. I know the Parapus haven't had the best lot in life, but I'm feeling more optimistic about our chances these days. Because, I mean, you're gonna be a king soon, yeah? Things will really start looking up for us then.
I'll do my best to live up to your expectations.
Good, because I'll be holding my breath. But I won't be sitting on my hands either. Not that we'll rely too much on you. It's gonna have to be a team effort. Though, I guess in an ideal world, we wouldn't need kings. One king can't make the world a better place. It takes everyone to pull that off.
But things aren't that easy.
That's true. The fight's only just begun. But I can see a path ahead. Just a matter of overcoming the obstacles. Our paths may be different, but I'll be fighting the good fight with you. And when the going gets tough, or when you feel all alone, you remember me. Because we're fighting together, king or not. No matter what lies ahead for you, we're comrades in arms.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm still so upset that Katharina wasn't a companion throughout this entire game. Like, I would have loved to have her in the party.
The loyal hunter, Katharina, keeper and heritor of the Brawler's virtues. Your tempered bond has become a fire-forged trust. Thus, a new pinnacle of heroism awakens within thee. By the grace of her newfound powers, work to give truth to our hopes and fulfill thy destiny.
My dreams may seem impossible, but I'm not giving them up.
I'm really excited to see the martial artist. I fucking love fighting classes, and it's just... Please have cool abilities.
Who's here? They've delivered some for us. You lot better save some for me. Wait, come and have a meal with us. Consider it an early coronation ceremony.
Oh, it's only up 30. I was like, oh wow, all the Parapus that are like suffering? That must be a massive population. 30 people.
Of a new king. 20 days remain.
To be fair, I can understand why they don't want like one group to massively outweigh the others.
Well then.
Okay. I want to see my archetype. Yeah. I like the neat, like super padded up shin guards. Okay, what does he have? Strong enemies are stunned more easily, deals heavy physical damage to one enemy, provides proportional to caster's remaining HP. Recover a small amount of HP to caster and cures the burn and frostbite effects. Deals heavy physical pierce, lowers defense, covers a medium amount of HP. Oh, so you have small and medium, but they both get rid of 2 different status effects. That's okay. It's very conditional, but I can see that being very good in like a fight where you need to have that removal. Allows one ally to endure 1 fatal attack, restoring them to full HP once per battle. That's a solid passive, especially because I know I literally just had a fight where like an enemy was given a free insta-kill. This is also the best passive. Prevents poison, malady, paralysis, hex, burn, and frostbite. I will say, it does kind of go against the use of both these skills. both these skills only target the caster. But if you have this last skill, it means these other two skills, it's literally like, this one is just worthless. You'll only ever want to use the big heal. But I want that passive. I want that thing to say, just fuck all the status ailments. Oh my god, that's such a good skill. Medium electric to all. Your physical light to 1. Strike to one enemy, inflicts one-time weakness strike relative to caster's current HP. Nice. Very cool. Very nice. Was that one of the classes we needed to unlock? Damn it, not for Heisme. Not for you. You. Okay, that was his. So Basilio needs martial artist and whatever this class is for the berserker. Yufa needs, what does she need? Soul hacker, which is the upgrade of hers. No wait, it's not. I thought soul hacker, maybe it is hers. Oh no, it's the maxed out version of this one. Oh. Well, we already got that unlocked. I'll actually just throw a ton of seeds at her. Yuna, I'm pretty sure it's these two for her. I just don't I guess maybe he also needs the either the upgrade of the summoner or like whatever the faker upgrades to. The biggest issue is I just need so much fucking Magla, and like I'm just gonna have to hard grind for a day or two, I think. And I don't really... You know, actually we can set her back to this. Because if I'm gonna go to a dungeon, I can't have her on this class. It's like, just not a good combination. Fine. No, this works out. Just because even if they level up with mastered skills, they'll just go to EXP shards. Reminds me. Don't have any. Okay. Let me think. We have a lot of days. 20-something days.
Let's see.
So it's going to be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I can only do those guys during the day. So it's going to be 15 days to get all of them done. Norris and Alonso are only an evening. That's 3. So I think I'll just get these two finished. Do a dungeon and farm up, and then I want to get Yufa maxed out because I'm actually actively using her. And then, depending how I feel, I don't know if I'm gonna bother maxing out Juna and Basilio, because like, I was reading into the New Game Plus for this game, and like, nothing really carries over. Like, I have to redo all these bonds, so truth be told, it's mostly been a waste of time unlocking all of them. Because I have to redo all that shit later on. I don't know. I'm just gonna hang out with Yufa.
Well,
If I can. Oh, I can't. I can't. Oh, I have to travel, I bet. Okay, you know, actually, let's do dungeon then. Go to...
Where to?
let's go.
Got it.
Everyone is here.
Now, what should we do?
This is the place.
That's that then. That's that. I think we have a favor to do there.
It's your call.
Let's be off.
What to pick?
Actually, before I forget, I think I'm gonna move Heisme for now over to martial artist and just try it out.
I see. Fascinate. This right here. All right.
I'm counting.
Of course.
My power swells forth.
I see. This. All right.
I'm
Oh.
I learned a new ability.
Leave it to me.
Why is it this armor? Protective gear made for bond. Such a bad piece of armor. Why? Oh, because everything else is equipped, isn't it? Una. I think that's the best one.
all right then.
I need one white peach turnip. Actually, wait. Just so I can get this out of my mind. Cooking. White peach turnip. Darko Meat Market and Virga Island.
Well met. Indeed. You see? What should we do?
What?
True.
All right.
Well then.
Hey, did you see? The Gauntlet Runner arrives at Malabelo Stoke, where magla crystals resembling massive humans jut eerily from the rock. For reasons as clear as the crystals, excavations here were deemed taboo and forbidden by the Sanctus Church. However, some say that the mining continues in secret. The crystalline figures gaze in silence at their new visitors, as though assessing them.
Whoa, check this out.
Hey. Here.
Hey.
I mean... Well...
Oh my god, I just realized I didn't swap back. I knew I'd forget to do that. God damn it, whatever.
Between, you know, what I'm actually trying to communicate to this person as an individual and both of our caricatures. Because everyone puts on a caricature. You know, for us as, you know, creators, it's when we're in front of the microphone or in front of the camera. For, you know, a teacher, it may be when they're, you know, online or in front of a classroom. But it's also really important to remind yourself that the person you're talking to on the other side, at the end of the day, is a person. And the moment, you know, you take the saber out, they're done. They're not listening to you anymore. And so when doing content like that, I'm really trying to find the balance. I'm really in the middle of this process now. I haven't found, you know, exactly how it works yet. But in this, I'm trying to find a way that, you know, I can both debunk the things that someone is talking about and still be able to have my punchy self and all that, but also be able to like actually be like, hey, here's what we can do better. Like, here's the way that like, these are some of the fallacies that you've kind of like fallen into. Like, you're hurting yourself by not doing this research. Like, all the information I find is not from like some academic paywall, some ivory tower. Like, these are all sources that are linked right here. You could have found them as well, and you didn't. So like, you know, do better. And like, I hate that. I hate do better because it feels like such a like a brush off. But like, you know, that's I think a really important part of it is that like this is something that everyone has the ability to do. And you know, we also need to make the space as open as possible so that people don't feel intimidated and scared away from it because it drives them right into the arms of pseudoscience.
I wish that there was more accountability from people that did the pseudoscientific stuff. It's harder because despite my aggressive personality online, I do feel bad when I'm like pressuring somebody a lot, and I can tell when somebody's getting really uncomfortable. But something I'm trying to do more is like, if you're going to be out here and you're going to claim that you've got some crazy answer in a field and you've got an audience and a following and you're leading people down a certain hallway, I think it's fair for people to start asking like, okay, well, when you say that you've read about this, read what? You know, which authors, like which studies, like talk about this. Like, I think you need to show, because I genuinely believe that the vast majority of not listeners, but content creators in the space read almost nothing, like Twitter headlines, not even news articles, which by the way, today an article is written to be read in about 3 to 4 minutes. Okay?
Yeah, that's true.
They're like
it
4
read
paragraphs
time at the top.
Yeah, it's insane. And people don't even read
Dude,
that.
some of these guys are up to level 70.
It's very frustrating that
The
there's
guy on
so
the
many
far
of
right
these
is
sayings,
overkilling
like,
it at
do
max
your own
level.
research.
Holy
And
shit.
it's like, that would actually be really great, but you don't. The people you listen to don't. You don't do any of your own research. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, people.
It'll be fine. It looks like it's averaging out at
one of the
60.
most insane things. I've only done this a couple times because it feels really bad. But if I have a guy who's willing to like be patient, and I'm like, you know what? You think this thing about, we did this a few times during the vaccine arc. You think this thing about the vaccines? Can you show me? Like, how would you find out if the FDA studied this? Like, can you share a screen? Just like walk me through how you would search for that. And that whole process was just so fascinating. I think he went to like Google and he's like, hold on. Then he goes to DuckDuckGo and I'm like, oh, why change search engines? He's like, I don't trust anything off of Google. And I'm like, okay. And then he goes to DuckDuckGo and he starts reading. He's like, okay, well, I don't know if I trust like the .gov sites or the FDA. And I'm like, okay. And then he goes over a few and he's like, okay. And then he clicks this and he clicks and he's like, okay, well, I guess this one kind of agrees with you. And then he goes back and I'm like, what do you think you just read? Like, what are you even reading? Like, a lot of people don't know a lot of the time what they're actually reading. Like, what's the difference between, I don't know, have you ever gotten into a debate with somebody where they'll give you like, here's 5 sources and it's 5 different news articles, but all of them are about the same date because they're all referencing the same study that was just published.
Absolutely.
And like, you're not, this is one source, it's one study that I'm guessing you haven't even read. Or I'll have somebody, I got into a debate with a guy over, it was Israeli-Palestinian stuff, and he was like, how do I know that, you know, these people believe whatever in Israel? And Yoav Gallant, the Minister of Defense, sometimes they tweet out their statements, and then I link, it's okay, well, here's what he said about this. And the guy's like, your source is Twitter? And I'm like, what do you mean by what? Or like if I link an article, like, oh, your source is CNN, and it's like, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Like, is my source Nature or the land? No, it's like a study. What do you mean?
It's
like
the guy that said the thing on this platform.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. And that again, that goes to that whole generalization thing, where it's like, if you can really convince a group of people that everything on Google or everything from the CDC is just
6 or 7, I think,
then they're not going to listen to it. Like that whole thing of, do your own research. I'm sure all of us have lost track of the amount of times we have heard that. Like, and it is just ridiculous. Like, it's a cliche at this point of how much I hear these people like, well, if you do your own research, you'll find this. And it's like, what research? I did my own research and I found that you are wrong.
It's the guy being like, I'm honest, trust me.
Yeah, literally. I'm like, I do not trust you. If you have to convince me that you're honest, you are not honest, And it's like, I also did my research. Here is what I found proving that what you're saying is wrong. So if you really did do your research, you either A, somehow missed all of this, which I doubt, or B, it is academic dishonesty because
I brought a clip,
whether they ignored it because it doesn't support them or because they genuinely don't trust it is anyone's guess. But like, that's just not how that works. So you're not doing your own research. You're cherry picking whatever you can find in order to support whatever your pre-existing bias is.
6,000 gold? Excuse me? Not okay.
What do you think that accountability should look like for, I guess, misinformation actors, but also importantly disinformation actors, because we kind of differentiated those two things.
Well, I just lose it.
Okay,
I don't get it back. Wow.
We're not for the death. Not for the death penalty, except for
being wrong.
Disinfo Twitter. Twitter posters.
Disinfo Twitter, punishable by death.
It's not a platform thing. It's a culture thing. The culture has to change. There needs to be more accountability mechanisms for people's media sources. Like the thing is that people can be wrong about so much, and it never, ever, ever, ever comes back to bite them.
Yep.
Like somebody will
in
quote,
some spaces.
Yeah, or well, whatever is your political mind has destroyed you on. Like people will quote, "My God, I've heard so many times." This is all in the political world. Like how many times like Fauci lied about masks, or Hillary Clinton called Trump an illegitimate president. And it's like, why does it only take a single statement that you'll hold on to for 8 years to impeach these people? But then when Donald Trump says like, "I know you'll be marching peacefully to the Capitol," why does one statement save him? Like there's a million different statements between all these people. Like you're really going to hang your hat off
positions.
One
like
thing
you
that
guys
this person
may be
genuinely might have
frontline.
gotten wrong, but you're going to ignore the 50 million other things that are incorrect here. Like where's your track record? Like Jesus.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And there's like, I mean, a level of cognitive dissonance, whether it's like, conscious or not, of, you have to ignore, you have to be aware that the thing you are saying is, I don't know. I don't even know. I don't know.
Ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. I don't have words for it. Like, and I think really that
it is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and that's ridiculous. I think that really my confusion here. I think really sums it up is like it is just so genuinely hard to like argue with, because when you are in a debate platform, when you are in like in a mentality of debunking or fact checking and things like that,
59.
you are looking for logic and
kinda high
reason.
level.
And many of these arguments and the way they are structured defy logic and reason. It's almost impossible to bring a science mind to the table because these arguments are not hinged on science or grounded in reality. They are literally just opinions.
Well, it's actually losing, right? Because the moment you have to go like, okay, well, you need to understand that there aren't periods in Antarctica because of blah, blah, blah. You say this a lot, but you're already engaging in their landscape and context, right? And the problem is it seems like, especially right now, we're in like this aggressively post-truth world with social media where it feels like a lot of times like it just doesn't matter what
like
is
there
true
are people in my we call them orbit. I don't know how much, but there are people in my orbit. There are other content creators and everybody else. Yeah, we're like, I'll watch them. I was watching Pisco like arguing with Sean over stuff on Twitter, and I'm like, I'm mad that Pisco's you shouldn't even have. This is not a real argument. We're not having a real. This is not real. Nobody believes this. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I don't even think it should be argued. My brain is like lives in January 6th right now. But it's like it has to do with with Sean actually. It had to do with New York stuff, and it was like yes, and it had to do with like a single statement that he had said that like that Alvin Bragg had made in New York about promising to go after Donald Trump. It was one single statement, and that proved that it was like a political prosecution. And it's like this guy's running for district attorney. Why would he not talk about prosecuting ongoing cases? And eventually, not only did we find out that he didn't make that quote, he said, okay, it was Letitia James who made that, but it wasn't actually her. She didn't even make that quote. And then he starts linking videos of her on her night after she won the election. And so it wasn't even what she ran on, arguably. And it's just like wrong after wrong after wrong. And it's like, bro, you're just like hunting for clips. And some of the information information that you cited is the exact opposite. Like he said, two attorneys quit Alvin Bragg's office because they thought that Alvin Bragg was being too politically partisan and wouldn't go after, and was going after Trump too much. But when you read the story, they actually quit because Alvin Bragg said he didn't want to bring an indictment in front of a grand jury because he didn't think there was enough evidence to go after Trump for it. So it was the exact opposite. So it's like you knew some pieces of information, but you were presenting them completely incorrectly. And yeah, just the conversations are like, if I switched any of the names here, it would be so different.
Completely.
It would be so different.
And this is, you know, kind of
like
what you were...
The Walls, Stolen Valor stuff. Donald Trump is literally a draft dodger. I know you don't care about this. You don't care about this.
No, I mean, like, I'm definitely not as, like, in the political sphere, but I mean, that's kind of how I found your content originally, was, you know, being in kind of the political space, especially over COVID. I mean, like, that was a very, I mean, it's all been a very tumultuous time pretty much since, you know, 2016 and, you know, even before a little bit. But, like, you know, I remember especially over COVID, it was at a fervent pitch. And, like, you know, the issue I think about the whole archaeology discussion now is that archaeology has been used in the past as something for political gain. It's something that's, you know, people will always find ways to make anything, any type of science into politics. Absolutely. It shouldn't be. I don't think that's a controversial take, that this is not something that should be political. It is so politicized now. It is ridiculous. And I'm not going to get too much into it because I'm not, you know, a political science person. That's just not really, you know, what I do. But, like, there is so much of this politicization around it, especially within the, you know, pseudo-archaeology field. And I stumble into that so much with the, you know, pseudoscience pipeline. Again, I talked about this at Virginia Tech, where, like, this is, pseudo-archaeology is one thing, pseudoscience is another. And, like, you know, I try and tackle and, you know, debate those concepts, but all of it is a pipeline that leads into conspiracy. And if you believe in one conspiracy, chances are you're going to believe in a lot more. And it's really not long when you start going down these rabbit holes that, like, you know, it's like, oh, you know, the pyramids were built by aliens. And then, like, oh, someone's covering it up. They're covering it up. The globalists. And then you start seeing, you know, like the echo parentheses and stuff like that. And it's like, holy shit, like, how did we get here? And, like, granted, and, like, very important to, like, you know, clarify this, is, like, not everyone who falls into this camp is someone who's going to be, you know, using, like, anti-Semitic dog whistles and stuff like that. But the people who want to use anti-Semitic dog whistles will fall into this camp. Like, I think that it is safe to say that that is going to be the direction that they're going to go towards. And that's a really challenging thing to talk about that I don't go into too much because it's a very, you know, sensitive subject, and I feel like I really want to make sure I'm well versed when I'm talking about it. But, you know, when Ancient Apocalypse came out, there was all, like, you know, the accusations of, you know, racism and things like that. And that's something which, the moment you mention that towards this crowd, they're like, you know, they called us racist. This is, you know, the woke mob, and they're, you know, trying to silence us and cancel us and all that. And first, you know, I have to, you know, hold up the mirror and say that, like, if I said something that I genuinely thought I was saying in good faith, and someone was like, hey, that was racist, you know, it might be a little bit hard to, you know, take at first, but I'd be like, okay, like, did I actually say something racist? Because I don't want to say something racist, you know, like, I would actually think about that and take it to heart for a second and be like, wait, what can I do that I didn't know was racist, and can, you know, make amends there? But the issue is that, you know, by you know, immediately going for that trigger of, like, you know, cancel culture and all that stuff, there's never a discussion to talk about how these theories can feed into a racist ideology. I don't think that everyone who peddles these theories is a racist. In fact, I don't think very many of them are, but racists will agree. They are theories that will back up a pre-existing racist ideology that individuals have. So no, I don't think that, like, Graham Hancock is making a theory that is, you know, inherently racist. I'm sure there are people who will, you know, debate me on that, or, you know, I don't think, let me correct that. I don't think that Graham Hancock is racist. I'm sure there are people who will argue with me on that, debate me on that, but the theory of Atlantis and things like that have roots in racist theory, and they are things that people will use who are already racist to back up their theories, and that's a very important thing to look at, because if you're saying something, and I trust that they're saying it in good faith, but you have people who are racist who are using what you are saying to back up their pre-existing racist ideologies, you have a responsibility to be more responsible about the things you're saying to make sure that that isn't happening if you genuinely care about it.
I'm super curious what you guys think about, and I know this is a bit of a deviation away, but I think about, like, the cancel culture, like, woke mob stuff. And I think about Gamergate in 2016, which actually I was a normie for, so I've kind of mostly retroactively gotten to look at it. Because there really was this proliferation of kind of, like, I would say, like, kind of leftist craziness that was occurring for a long time, particularly culturally, like, socioculturally, where there was getting a point where it's like everything under the sun is right. Like, everyone was called a racist. It was just like the bludgeon. I know you fought with a lot of leftists for a long time about this, So like to what degree is what's occurring now amongst the right like kind of this harsh reactionary to that, or like do you guys see these two things as being related?
I mean, it's tough. I think really the challenging thing is like nothing means anything anymore. Like, you know, the thing that they're saying is cancel culture, and, you know, like being silenced is, you know, someone saying, hey, I fact checked what you said and it's wrong. Like, you know, the racism thing is honestly a tiny sliver of that pie chart. I just bring it up because I think it's a pretty pervasive example. But like, you know, we're just talking about, you know, pyramids in Antarctica here, where it's like, if someone did research on that and was like, hey, that's wrong, you know, people will jump to the whole like, well, you're silencing me.
Oh
like,
my god.
what?
We're getting so many
That's
actions.
not even what the point of this is. Like, are you hearing the words that are coming out of my mouth? You know, it's tough. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I agree with what you said, that nothing means anything anymore. I also think everybody will use whatever tool is available to them. Like, people will decry, you know, some tactic. Tim Pool talks about freedom of speech, and now he's saying he wants to sue the Kamala Harris campaign because they just used a clip of his. Like, people...
Beautiful.
Yeah, people always use whatever tool is available to them and convenient to them. And it's frustrating because, like, a well-intended person on the left will be saying, like, to a person on the right, I think that person is racist, and then this person will come back over the top, and you'll try to argue with the person on the left, be like, okay, hold on, I don't think this guy's racist against, you know, these people. I think there's something else going on. And then this guy will come back and go, oh, this guy's like actually a postmodern neo-Marxist crazy person. And then they're like, well, look at what he's saying now. And it's like, okay, yeah, now he is being a moron, but it's because
actually, oh, you know what? I just realized. I think I know why it's so loud.
And it's just, so it's so unhinged.
There is no chicken and egg, obviously.
I might
I guess,
lower
like,
it down a little
part
bit.
of this problem is probably that the internet is like this new medium, and so really,
I was just like thinking for the last half hour, like, God, it feels a bit louder than the last video.
But I am curious, and it could just be age bias of 2016 is around the time when I was probably starting to pay closer attention to social media, particularly because I was like sheltered until like 2014 or so, which is much older than most people are getting into socioculture stuff, obviously. So I'm wondering, maybe I just have a bias of like seeing kind of the rise of like kind of the like cringy SJW stuff where you're like, I hate that SJW is now associated with like the cringy stuff, because I actually agree with a lot of like their issues, but also they've been like really gross with how they've like bludgeoned people with pretty morally loaded words. And now we're seeing this kind of like right-wing snap reactionary movement where I'm like, you know, there were studies coming out that the more you deplatform these people, they go to Gab and then they just get more extreme over there. To what extent have like we created the problem, or is it there no chicken and egg in that? Like, if 2016 happened of the like the left-wing kind of reactionary movement, because before then there was like some pretty intense right-wing, and I'm just not aware of it because I wasn't like socioculturally involved back then.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've thought about that a little bit as well. In 2016, I was partway through high school. I was 16 at the time. And honestly, a lot of my lived experience in 2016 is why much of my interest in archaeology has manifested as debunking content. Because when I was 16, I was like fully on the alt-right pipeline. Like it was early stages, but I was absolutely in it. Like everyone that I was watching was all just talking about, you know, the SJWs, and, you know, it was like, you know, you'd watch one person who has like some bad take, you know, someone who's, you know, talking about how like kill all men, and it's like, okay, well, obviously that person doesn't represent everyone, but, you know, then they're starting to talk about like, you know, how all the feminists are out to get you, and how like this is against men, and like, you know, they don't want you to, and then like before you know it,
we need to pause you. Okay. Complete embodiment of power demonstrated by Hulkenberg's way of life, a world-changing pillar of power that defends the new ruler through noble virtue. Performs well in both attack and defense, demonstrating proficiency in all situations. It has... Can I see the skills? Holy Knight Proclamation. Is that the same as the other knight? Or I think it's the same. Ensure status ailments are automatically cured in one turn. Very nice. Physical electric damage to one enemy, lowering defense, good. Heavy physical pierce, good. Raises a barrier that nullifies one non-almighty attack for an ally, cool. Increases pierce attack by 30%, so big damage up. Chance to repel on almighty damage, so just a passive fuck you to anything. As a one-turn icon, the turn after a proclamation skill is used. Does not apply if caster is incapacitated. Adds one turn. They can use proclamation for free. Oh, that's so fucking good. And if I can equip her with like electric dodge or electric resistance, they're like pretty fucking set on being tanky as all hell. Raise a barrier that nullifies one almighty attack for all allies. Severe physical light enemies, increasing attack, defense, evasion. Seeker, Knight, or Commander. Knight, Healer, Commander. I think the Prince archetype counts for that. Here's the one thing that sucks. There is no, like, ultimate healer or ultimate whatever class, you know? So to get these, like, ultra high-end skills, you need to have one ally that isn't maxed out.
Fascinating. This right here. All right.
I'm counting on you.
Of course.
I see.
Oh.
To greater heights.
I was really hoping for, like, some sort of custom cutscene or animation for that. Because this literally is an archetype that only she can get. So, pretty cool. Oh wait, oh, almost forgot. So, I don't have lightning dodge. Cringe. Half's MP cost of synthesis only applies to synthesis that's MP. Increases crit rate. That's a good one because she kills. She doesn't need MP recovery. She doesn't really burn through that much. That's actually a really good passive. I do want her to have a skill though. I personally just want her to have something to like either neuter the enemy a bit or to pump up my allies. Oh, it is different. She has Knight's Proclamation versus Holy Knight's Proclamation. I need to look up to see what the difference is. Actually, can I just equip it and then check? I didn't know. Guards drawing enemies attacking one turn. I think it says she guards. So she gets into a defensive stand. Okay, never mind. It's infinitely better. Pierce boost could be good, just to increase her damage. Ooh, also just count. Do I just go straight? Full counter? I don't know if it's stackable though. If it's stackable, it might be good. No, I think I just need to give her something to like help out the allies. Does she have any skills for like buffing everyone? There's a bear that repels a slam. The Kunda. The Kunda. We'll go with that. Good status removal. Okay. Well, that's all she's gonna be for the rest of the game. Yufa, we still have no fucking idea. Heismay. Still don't really know his too. We're not gonna worry about that. We're just gonna give her some free EXP. So that she actually has skills.
A new means of protection.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
You're in these like you're
He's
getting
all
like
doped
dog
up.
whistle preloads, you know, before your balls dropped. And so like that's something that was you know, pretty frightening for me. And thankfully I had some really patient and, you know, kind friends in my high school who were able to kind of be like, hey Milo, this is, you know, maybe think about that for a second. And they kind of like were very patient and kind of talked me through it and were able to like fully get me off it. I mean, look at who I am now, you know? And so I think that's really why I try and do what I do, because I know how impactful it is for people to have an opinion like that challenged. Because if it runs unchallenged, it's really easy to be angry. And I'm sure someone could, you know, argue like, well, Milo, you're angry about the pseudo-archaeologist. And yeah, maybe I am. But I think it's a little bit different where, you know, I'm not really trying to change the mind of the people whose videos I'm talking about. I'm trying to let everyone who sees those videos have the tools that they need to not fall into the trap for themselves. It does not matter to me if, you know, Ancient Apocalypse, if any of the people on there change their mind. It doesn't matter to me if, you know, any of the TikToks that I, you know, respond to change the minds of the people who made them in the first place. It's as long as that video gains more traction and more people see it and are able to have the tools for themselves to not fall into it. Because we are, ironically, we're actually falling into the exact same trap. That's really the problem with this, is we're not even talking about archaeology anymore. The last of it has just been politics and psychology and the way that, you know, like radicalization works and stuff. And I can talk about that stuff day and night, but like really it's kind of just, you know, empirical evidence. Like I'm just talking about, you know, what my experience is with it and stuff like that. And, you know, by doing that, we do that thing that you were talking about where it's like, you just fell right into the tar pit, where it's like, we're not talking about what like nothing means anything anymore. We're all just, you know, talking about, you know, how you think and why you think and what this word means and that word means. And it's like, no, this boils down to what is fact and what is fiction. And that is it. If you want to turn that into politics, you can. If we want to take that down a political route, we can. But it is so frustrating that this simple idea of something that is true and something that is false has been turned into what it has.
I think we should just branch off the societies and let them all live in their own society.
Tribalism.
When I see people say like, yeah, I don't trust the FDA, blah, blah. Okay, well, stop taking your insulin. Don't take any more ibuprofen. Cancel your, you know, your grandma's cancer treatments. Okay. Because if you don't believe in it, why would you believe in, yeah, it's so stupid. Like,
yep. There goes your healthcare.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I feel like there is a big issue, a fundamental misunderstanding that humans are naturally these truth-seeking machines. You mentioned earlier that it feels a little gatekeepy for science. You have to teach somebody how to do science, and it feels gatekeepy to say that. But the reality is like we have a lot of cognitive pitfalls that a lot of people just aren't aware of. And I think going onto the internet and assuming that you can just put a human being in the middle of all this information, they're going to absorb and be able to discern what's true from what's false, rather than what makes me feel good, is just absolutely not true. And we know this in every other part of society. Look at our engagement with food.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We didn't evolve to deal with, like, you know, ultra-processed, calorie-rich food everywhere, and then we have no way to deal with it. And the same is true for information as well, right? You don't have to confront a neighbor if you've got ideas that you guys disagree with a lot. You can just go onto the internet and find whatever group of people wants to reinforce whatever idea that you might have.
Exactly.
And because people aren't even aware that our minds have these types of limitations or these like cognitive pitfalls, they don't even think to protect against it. And that's where you get people who will say things like, yeah, I'm confident of this because I get my news from a variety of resources, and their variety of resources are 3 different podcasts that don't do any homework or research themselves.
Exactly. It turns into a bit of the blind leading the blind scenario. And that's also really the
No, it's the malicious leading the blind, because the content creators should know better.
That's a very good point. I think that's a good distinction to make. And that's also a really hard one to kind of, you know, find the distinction of is, you know, when someone is misinformed and when they are being consciously malicious. And it really varies from, you know, person to person, but I mean, you definitely see it. I've come across more than a few people who I'm like, you can't believe these words that are coming out of your mouth. Especially people who, like, you know, will intentionally rile up their audience or point them to, like, send, like, you know, letters to, like, the universities that archaeologists worked at. I mean, Flint had to deal with that. Like, that's like attack dog stuff. That is like, we are so beyond the realm of rationale that, like, it blows my mind. Yeah.
Just as a quick fun fact on all that, I know it's I don't know if this counts as paleontology or archaeology for dinosaurs, but you'd be surprised, I don't know if you've noticed this yet, you'd be surprised at the number of far-right people that if you just ask them, what do you think about dinosaurs? You get there's a lot of people that don't believe in dinosaurs anymore. Do you know that?
Yeah. It's
and
madness.
There's like a whole like petroleum like conspiracy theory around like how isn't it curious that once petroleum became popular, people started talking about dinosaurs more, and there's a reason why they try to like, and it's like,
wow, talk about chicken and egg.
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
I remember the first time, so I grew up a fundamentalist Christian young earther, but I always believed in dinos, okay?
Okay,
They're in the Bible.
Good, yeah.
They're in the Bible.
Perfect.
But the first time I was ever exposed to a non-dino believer, just not a very good label. But she was like, we were talking about paleontology and dinosaurs. I think I was talking about dinosaurs and I thought they were really interesting or whatever. And she's like, wait, you believe in dinosaurs? And I was like, wait, you don't believe in dinosaurs? And I was like, still actively a young earther at the time that she said this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
That was like, it was like the most like mind-blowing moment of being like, wait, what the, like, wait, what? Wait, hold on. And it was like, began this cycle of being like, I need to reanalyze my entire life.
That's
like,
crazy.
am I part of the group that doesn't believe in dinosaurs? Like, but yeah, it's super wild, like how all these things kind of like collect together. Specifically, like the pseudo-archaeology and the right-wing specific politics. I'm super curious, is there as much pseudo-archaeology on like fringe left politics, or probably not so much, I'm guessing?
I'm sure there's a couple,
but it's more prominent on the
But
right.
my God, I could not point to an example. I mean that. Like, I really do try and hold up that mirror, and I understand that I'll always have my biases, but like, when it comes to right-wing conspiracy ideology, it goes hand in hand with archaeology. And I think it's, this kind of branched mentality of, the they, whether, whatever the implication of that is, that it's like, there is a big group who are in cahoots to keep you in the dark. And that's what it always comes down to, is like, oh, they reburied parts of, Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe. What are they hiding there? We need to demand that they excavate it now. And it's like, that is how archaeology has always been conducted. These sites have been buried for thousands of years. When you open them to the public or to the air, they erode, they come apart. You have to rebury them in order to protect them so that you can wait for better, technology to arise in the future. I mean, a very small portion of Pompeii is a comparatively small portion of Pompeii is excavated. And the only reason they haven't dug up the rest of it is because we're just waiting for better technology to, arise in the future so that we can actually gain more information from those sites. And so like, but it's way too easy to look at that. And if your mind is primed to assume that everyone is out to get you, you're going to look at it as some big cover up to keep you in the dark, when like, it isn't. This is just the way that this works, but people don't have the basis of knowledge to know how archaeology functions. And so of course they're primed to believe that this is some, big cover up. It's crazy. I'm almost like, what do you think they're hiding? Like, what is big archaeology doing to like?
I think it's a projection of your own, how you view the world and how you would conduct things onto other people if you were the one in charge. Like every scientific discipline gets hijacked for whatever stuff somebody's trying to pass, off as actual fact instead of just political opinion. And I think that for historical stuff, there's huge narratives built around, who controlled what. Like a far left example. I don't know if it's called Afrocentrism, but I know that there are groups of people.
I haven't tried it. I want to try this.
Yeah.
Common as it is on the right, for whatever reason. But like there are people that will try to argue that, for instance, like all of Egypt was all pure black African Americans. All of them were. And it's a fringe belief, but like they argue this because then, now for modern day, they can claim that like, oh, well, look, we came from Egypt and we built the pyramids and this was all our civilization and we get to take credit for this. And then on the flip side, other people, on the white side will argue, that we shouldn't pay, homage to black creators or inventors or whatever because all of this stuff was founded by Europeans. That's when I argue with that one striker or whatever over music. And he was saying like, oh, jazz is just a bastardization of the waltz. And actually all the great music was made by Europeans. And that's because you want to be able to claim like all of music for your own pure like white ancestry. Yeah. What a debate. He opened with that argument.
Wow.
And my background is saxophone. I played, and I was like, oh my God, thank you, God.
That is a strong start. Jesus, what an opener.
And then I just
but it's not, none of it is actually like a factual analysis. It's like, okay, yeah.
It's like
tell me how like the Jews did this and blacks did all this and go ahead. Yeah.
And that's it. And that's really it. Is it's like, are you done?
Yeah.
Can we talk about something real now? Like, I mean, and that's really the thing about it is like there's a couple, creators, if you even want to call them that, in sort of of the pseudo-archaeology space who will remain nameless for the sake of, you know, not stirring the pot at all. But like people send me their stuff all the time, and it is, you know, exactly that kind of stuff where it's like, you know, they're hiding this from you. We need more excavations, and we need like this and that, and you know, there's a big cabal covering it, and I'm like, have fun with that. Like, I'm not even gonna, like, what do I say to you to get through your skull? Because I'm not going to. So it's like, you have your hissy fit, I'm gonna teach archaeology, because that's going to be the thing that actually is going to inform people. This
But now
isn't
that
doing
you're
anything.
growing, now you can be the subject of conspiracies.
Exactly.
And it's fun. Like the last tip I had with Candace Owens, she's like, oh, like I think he gets paid by Israel, and it's like, dude, we can both publish all of our income sources. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how am I even supposed to counter this? That like somebody be like, oh yeah, I think he got paid by. How can I even?
I really don't like the fighter class on Heisman, or at least just like how I have it set up right now.
Stands out to me is when I did the evil Smithsonian.
Because he's just constantly trying to use the two really shitty heels.
I got my plaque and I got to destroy a giant skeleton. It was
What does
pretty
he want?
exciting. My
Ninja
black robe is still in
Tycoon.
the mail, you know.
I don't like either of these.
But you know, and it is that whole mentality of just general distrust. You know, when I did my piece talking about ancient apocalypse, there's one comment that really stood out to me. A lot of really positive comments. I really tried my best in that one to make it not, you know, be a cult of personality where I'm attacking the individual. It was more me really trying to analyze what he was saying, and a lot of people got that. There was a ton of people who were like, wow, I just watched this because, you know, I was stoned on my couch and I wanted something to see, and I didn't have any reason to doubt it. He's got a British accent, sounds believable. And they're like, and you know, you actually like fact check this. I could look through your sources and, you know, I see that you were actually telling the truth. And so for the most part, it was great. But I remember there's obviously a lot of comments that were pretty negative, as you can imagine, but there was one that really stood out to me, and I think it was as simple as, you are the one he warned us about. And I'm like, do you hear yourself? Like, do you hear yourself? This is not archaeology. This is like cult mentality. And like, that's really where it blends into like this whole idea of, you know, like, you know, far gone ideology where like it ends up becoming like a cult. It's crazy.
The last guy that I debated 2 days ago on stuff related to the election, it was like, yeah, I can tell, like I'm listening to people like you, and you seem super reasonable all the time. Like you say so many reasonable, really logical things, but as soon as you talk about Donald Trump, you become unhinged. And I'm like, do you think that maybe that might be your problem? And like think about what you just said. And he was like, well, yeah, well, I can definitely tell that there's like a cult of people that don't like Donald Trump. And I was like, I have a shotgun on the wall behind me. You have 2 golden Donald Trump shoes behind you. Like, who's in the cult right now? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like look at what is in your frame. It's like insane. There's a general distrust sometimes. No, I don't like that phrase. I understand what you're saying. I don't know why you say it. I wish it was, or if it was a general distrust, I could be a little bit more forgiving. Like somebody who's like an ultimate skeptic, I could be more forgiving. It's the fact that it's so general, or no, I'm sorry, that it's so specific and selective in how it's applied.
Mm-hmm.
Like people will tell you about, you know, how much they don't trust a lot of the large institutions and the systems, and you know, everything is rigged against them. But if you really look at it, Elon Musk is who George Soros was supposed to be, right? He's a foreigner who bought a publicly traded social media platform. He took it private by using foreign money to purchase it, and now there's no transparency into it, and he posts all of his far-right public opinions on the platform in a way that no other large social media, like that's everything that you said George Soros would do, that he hasn't done, by the way. And now Elon Musk is doing it. Why don't you care at all, right? Like, how much have you seen people on the right talk about Elon Musk's Neuralink thing? Like a little bit, but not much. Can you imagine if Bill Gates had a Neuralink thing? Bro, you'd hear about it every day. Yeah, holy shit.
God damn.
Yeah, I
think Youth was the best on that.
I can't remember who said it, but if the person who is ideologically opposed to you, when you describe them, if they're both a dumbass and a superpowered villain, you probably have a really bad understanding.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect.
Like, this is like a fascism thing. It's where like, yeah, these people are weak and stupid and horrible, but also they're like threatening to overtake all of society, and we're on the verge of losing the war to them. And it's like, well, what is it, right? Because like half the time, like we're talking about like Jews, like the way you explain to me, I think I want these people as my leaders. If they truly are controlling every facet of reality, and they have for like thousands of years, I think I want to be on their team. Then rule over me. Like, yeah,
it's been a general uphill for the last little bit, you know. Like we got our dips, but like they seem to be doing a good job, I guess. Oh man.
I'm super curious when you get into kind of this debunking stuff. What has been some of your more enjoyable things to debunk?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like, you know, I'm glad we're kind of heading in this direction because, you know, it is it's intense to kind of talk about the psychology of all of it. But at the end of the day, the debunking content is really fun. It is really, really, really fun. And I think that, you know, really it really varies from topic to topic. So every video that I do is kind of something different. So depending on what it is that they're talking about in the video, but really the things that I like to debunk the most are things that actually have some foundation in reality, like something that is more someone extrapolating or misinterpreting like actual evidence, like pyramids in Antarctica, you know, like when people talk about, you know, like giant skeletons or Nephilim or the archaeological cabal, it's like, are you done yet? Like, cool, thank you. Now you want to give me like something, because like, you know, with the pyramids in Antarctica that we, like, I'm really glad we picked this image. You know, that's based on an image of a mountain in, you know, Antarctica where the snow has blown up the side of it, and it like kind of looks like it has like two sloped sides, and so people are like, oh, it's a pyramid buried in the snow. And like, this is like really at the very early, like the very low end of something where I can actually like debunk it. And it's like, no, the reason it looks like that is because it is a mountain. It is in a continent that's covered in ice. I can apply my knowledge of environmental science to tell you how a mountain like that is shaped. It's the same structure that the Matterhorn is, where you see that like very iconic, almost pyramidal top, but this one is mostly buried. So glaciers have a process of sort of really like sloping mountains, and so because this is a mountain covered in, or a continent covered in ice, that's how this mountain was created. So I can like give a little bit of actual like rationale to explain why it looks like that, because the whole conspiracy is just based on it looks like, and then extrapolating the rest. So I really like doing things like that, where like I can actually, like, they actually make points that I can look at critically and assess whether or not they're true.
And educate.
And educate, exactly. Like, it gives people a little bit of extra information that they can use in the future.
The looks like thing is so hard. Not to suck it too much into a political realm. 9/11.
Oh, Jesus.
But unironically, 9/11, yeah, it's so funny when people will look at, I mean, I'm sure people will look at like the snow blowing off the mountains, or for 9/11, it was, is it Building 7, I think, coming down? It's so funny because one logical pitfall that people will fall into is people will see a thing and it will look like pretty peculiar, and you never take a step back and like, hold on, how peculiar is this particular thing? Or like, do you even have a standard of comparison for this thing? Like when you say you could apply this to literally any stat, any number, somebody will say something like,
Trump
can you believe that
10% embargo,
or even something even less malicious, like this guy hit his sister, you know, 14 times growing up. And it's like, okay, well, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that. When you say hit, like when they were 3, what is the average number of times that he hits like a sibling? I don't know. Like, and I don't have that information. I don't even know how the fuck I'm supposed to feel about this particular thing. And people will say things like, with all seriousness, will be like, I watched the towers. I saw that building collapse. There's no way that a fire alone could bring down a building like that. It's like, how the fuck would you know? How many times have you seen a building of this size? Yeah, next to 2 other buildings that got hit by commercial airliners, and then the whole, like, what is your point of comparison here to be so confidently telling me?
I've seen this happen a lot. So actually,
or like the way that the mountain blows up and stuff, like there's no way that could form the way. Really? Yeah. Like how many mountains have you seen snow blow off of before? Like what the fuck are you even comparing this to? Like it just seems like it wouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Like because there's a lot of it's. And I wish I could find a snappier way to do it, but it's like you go outside and there's a pothole and there's a puddle in it, and it's like, what's the chance that the puddle would be the exact same shape as the pothole that it's in? And it's like, it's probably a really good chance, actually. It's probably the only way that it could be. Like, it's so frustrating, yeah.
It is. It's really frustrating. The one that always gets me, and I talk about this a lot because it's just like, it's low-hanging fruit, is the giant footprints. I mean, it's everywhere of people, you know, like there's this one image, and I will, you know, throw it up for the YouTube version of this, but it's like a guy standing next to this giant footprint in South Africa. It's, you know, as big as he is, and it's in like a granite wall like next to him, and it looks like a footprint, and that's it. And I'm like, where is like the critical thinking here? Like, why is it on a wall upright like this?
Wait,
yeah,
he was like
in granite too, which
it's
is
like
like
Spider-Man giant.
Yeah, exactly. And he just like, you know, climbing up there, and then no more footprints after that.
Just one?
And also like, just one.
Well,
that
he was
it.
thinking about going up, and then he was like, oh, fuck, my like crazy ex is up there. And it's like,
I can't stand her. And then, you know, it's also like, you know, this is in like granite. The last time this would have been like pliable, it was like magma, and then it had to be like, you know, crushed and like moved, and it's like just
It's got hot feet.
Yeah, I'm like, and it was underground. Like, granted, it doesn't just form from like erupting from a volcano. Like, it cools and it morphs and it compresses and then it comes to the surface. And I'm like, where is the critical thinking in that? So there is something really fun about that because, like, you know, at the risk of sounding really pretentious, like, you can kind of run circles around that shit. Where it's like, if someone does just come to you with something that is genuinely just based on it looks like, you know, I don't remember which razor it is, but, you know, like, extraordinary or claims made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. It's like, yeah, it's like, okay, then great. If you think it looks like a footprint and it is a footprint, I tell you it's not a footprint. Like, I'm not gonna argue with you on that, you know?
And in a million different pictures of things, like I'm sure you could probably find a lot of really weird things just by virtue of how many things there are. There are a lot of things.
There's a lot of things.
There's a lot of things.
There's a lot of things.
You can find a lot of things that look weird and are weird.
Ghost photos, like I don't do any like paranormal stuff.
Dude, that Night Holy Proclamation is such a huge upgrade.
It's not in the scientific realm. If there is paranormal stuff, we haven't found a way to quantify it, and so I'm not gonna, you know, talk about that. But like, you know, ghost photos and stuff where it's like, there's a little light in this picture. It's like, awesome. Or there's a lot of pictures.
Yeah, there's a guy that does, I don't know his name, but he did a video on, I think it was a JFK shooting, and he takes like a 5-minute thing to explain, broadly about like, I guess like misinformation. And he goes on to say, like, let's say that there's a bank robbery and the guy gets away, but it seems like in order to have gotten away, he would have had to have gone pretty fast, but like every other fact like seems to sell the story. You can't dismiss an entire thing just because something is unlikely. And people will do that. People will find think, well, what are the chances of this happening? They could be pretty low. So what?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't mean it's impossible. And if every other fact is pointing that direction, you can't take one or two things that are improbable. Like, improbable things do happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
Careful, they're gonna take that statement and be like, improbable things do happen.
Yeah, improbable things do happen. Yeah, people, I firmly believe that people have 3 numbers in their mind when it comes to stats. It's 0%, 50%, and 100%. There's nothing, like a 90% thing can never fail for a person, and a 15% thing can never happen. And yeah, people just have a really bad time, again, because we're used to seeing patterns, and that's what we kind of look for, I think, as people, and we'll create patterns if there are none. I think.
Yeah, and that's why we get the whole it looks like thing, is because that's the way our brains work. Like, everything that's going on here, this is all very new. We're not supposed to be doing this. Like, we are supposed to be, you know...
They're really just burning all my items.
Like,
holy fuck, AI.
Out of the realm and scope of what a human brain is supposed to be processing. So because we have our, you know, hardwired brain, without getting into, like, the EvoPsych thing, which is its own can of worms, you know, like, our brain is wired to see patterns. It's a survival, you know, instinct. It's a survival behavior. And so we see things everywhere. Like, the amount of times I've walked down the street and been like, oh, that building kind of looks like a face. Like, no shit, we're programmed to see human faces. That's what we recognize, you know? Like, that's the most important thing you see is another person's face. So it's like, oh, you see a face in the cloud or a footprint on the stone, and it's like, of course you see that. They're reference points for you, you know?
In fact, you have like parts of your brain dedicated just to facial recognition.
Yeah.
And nothing. There's no part of your brain that's dedicated to just foliage recognition of leaves, right?
Yeah.
But there's a whole, like, the amygdala just responds to eyes like crazy.
Totally.
Regardless of the orientation. One thing that I was thinking about of like these little, like, there's these little facts that experts and people knowledgeable in a field take for granted a lot of times because it's such common knowledge that people don't know. For example, the reason that excavation sites get reburied and the reason why they don't just excavate all of Pompeii, I actually had no idea until talking to Flint today. I had no idea. I've never questioned it because I'm decently trusting in institutions of being like, I assume experts are smarter than me and have a good reason for things, typically. But it's interesting of being like, I wonder how many people could have been inoculated from a whole bunch of beliefs if they just understood, oh, well, you have to rebury it. You have to protect it for future technology. As soon as I hear that, I'm like, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Also, obviously, right? And there's all these like little tiny things that I remember the first time I learned
second boss.
Of the brain, right? And that's like, oh,
dude, I have no
MP.
Fuck me.
Explains like all of our thinking errors and the development of science. Like it's oh, okay, all this shit suddenly makes sense, but it's something that like you take for granted when you're an expert in this field, which is why I talk so much about, like, I think so much about how important the knowing how to understand the field is important, because there's these little things that you're going to just pick up even if you don't put language to when you're getting educated or mentored by an expert in something that you just can't really get access to. I've never read anywhere, although I'm sure it's somewhere. I've never heard somebody say, we rebury because of X, right? And I watch a, like, documentaries.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of archaeology documentaries and stuff. Not that that makes me an expert on anything, but right? It's like, oh,
I don't want to use that. That's such a waste.
And I'm glad you bring that up because that's really the crux of it. Is what you're talking about is science communication. That's why like that is the leading thing. Like I don't even have like debunker in my bio. At least I don't think I do. I may still some, but like I don't lead with that. Like that is not one of the things I do. I'm an environmental scientist. I'm an archaeologist, and I'm a science communicator. Science communicator, honestly, before all of those, because that is the most important thing, is being able to give people the tools they need to understand these things. And that's really like my frustration with science and the scientific world, is that maybe to no fault of science, maybe it's the fault of the system that we've kind of created, but science is locked behind a paywall. If you want to go to college, you have to have the money to go to college, which creates a bottleneck so that you have to be wealthy in order to be highly educated, which is absolute bullshit. So like, if you create a system where you have something that restricts people from being able to achieve higher education, we have no one to blame but ourselves when people aren't educated enough to recognize these things for themselves. Like, that's why I've really tried to, you know, dial back how punchy I am, because like it's not going to do any good to like, you know, bully someone who just wasn't educated in this. They don't have the tools to like, you know, compete in the same level. And like I really am trying my best to not say that in a way that sounds really pretentious. It's like science and academia has an obligation to like connect with the public. They have an obligation to reach out to people and make them feel welcome in the space, so that other people, regardless of how much money they have, regardless of if they've gone to college, can have the tools and the same understanding that they do. Like that's, you know, like I talked about that again in my Virginia Tech Talk, and it's something else I'm going to be doing at my upcoming lecture at the University of Maine, where it's like, I love what all of my professors taught me. It's wonderful to go to a classroom and sit there, but at the end of the day, and that whole semester, you and 50 other kids have learned what happened in that classroom, and you go home and you'll tell your friends, and maybe you'll get a PhD and you'll become a professor too someday, and that's great. I teach classrooms of millions of people. Like, that is education. That is science communication. That is why what I do is so important. And it's like, that is why I'm really trying to bring more people into the fold, and why I'm so excited to see people like Flint, who are like, you know, beyond academic, you know, prowess, coming into the field, because like, this is how you teach people. We still have to have universities. We still have to have classes. And I understand that there's going to be financial incentives always, but like, we need to move past the classroom and make these things available for everyone.
I think another really tricky thing about like dissemination and science communication that I've been thinking about a lot is that even though I actually value it, that essentially a bachelor's is required for basically most entry jobs that pay decently well. But there's pros and cons of that. Pro is that you have a more educated populace. Con is that the reality is that because you're en masse educating people in a university setting, when university wasn't originally really set up for that style of education, the problem is that the value of a bachelor somewhat erodes, and therefore you have situations where
this is just gonna take fucking forever.
Somebody who gets an A+ in every one of their classes and does like an undergrad thesis and stuff like that, they might only have a bachelor's, but that's a very, very different type of thinker and like knowledge, like soft expert on whatever their major is in, than somebody who got like C's all the way through. They're like, man, fuck it, I don't care. I'm here to get my degree. I don't care about any of this shit, so I can get a better job pay, which is super legitimate because you need these things, right? So it creates like this issue where I think a lot of people get increasingly disenfranchised with like the education institution. They're like, yeah, well, my sister-in-law has a bachelor's degree in psychology and she's dumb. And it's like, well, your sister-in-law might be fucking dumb and might have gotten C's in psychology, but that doesn't mean that the education system or that bachelors are inherently dumb. It just means that like you have to be able to think past your heuristic of what you think a bachelor's is and learn how to evaluate who's a good thinker on these things and who's not.
Yeah, you shouldn't attribute something to the entire scientific system that can be attributed to an individual.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, but it makes it really tricky. Like, it sometimes frustrates me being like, I really want people to go and get like a secondary education and whatnot, but I also kind of resent that the job force requires people to get secondary education that I know don't care about what they're learning, because now you've got a bunch of people with like a bachelor of biology or bachelor of psychology that never use it, spent a lot of money on it, and like probably don't really rep the field. And it like muddies down what the field even represents, which is unfortunate. But
maybe an issue for a lot of the education stuff is like, in terms of teaching like actual like critical thinking, there's not much incentive to do it. It's probably not that helpful for a lot of people, and you can specialize and do decently in a job without having any curiosity or any good like foundation to build, you know, critical thought. You don't really need any of those for most jobs. So if you don't need them for the job, And if you don't need to learn that in school, and if you don't have an interest in it, I think it's really hard to force that on people, because there's so little reward for exercising that type of thought in society. And in a lot of ways, there's a lot of punishment. You can do so at your detriment. Like if you exist in a certain community that is, we'll say, like heavily religious, and you, for whatever reason, discover atheism, or it could be the other way around. Maybe you're in a community that's super atheist and you discover, religion. There might be a big punishment for you coming to a different idea, even if you're using some critical thought process. It's like, well, what the fuck is the incentive? Like, there's no reward for it. And then, especially when you look at people that exist in large spaces and disseminate information publicly, it's not done in a very critically accepted way.
Yeah.
And it's not very critical at all. And like these people, there is no critical, but like, where's the reward? There's no reward for it. There's no benefit. And there's a detriment for it, right? However many videos you take, if you did half the research, you could do 10 times as many videos.
Totally,
right?
yeah.
So like,
yeah.
well, what the fuck is the point? You're losing money.
It
right?
is.
It's like this has to be like a value judgment in your mind, and you're willing to take a hit to actually go through and adhere to some principle or some idea. But but most people won't. You would expect most people to do it. I think it's a problem. It's frustrating.
It is. It's very frustrating, and it's a challenge to, changing one's mind is.
Oh my god, 2 damage. Okay, I need to swap out some allies.
That's something that I also really try
this turn
to
I'm
do,
swapping. I need to swap. I don't know who.
Is try my best.
I think maybe to swap out Heisman
to set
for.
aside what my implicit bias may be, to actually look at it as.
We'll swap out
because
Heisman for
at the end of the
Juna.
day, I do genuinely think that, like, we talked about this a little bit earlier, where it's like things
This is just taking way too fucking long.
Controversial can sometimes, when researched, end up being true. You were talking about that,
Oh, she's on Faker right now.
I forget what
Fuck
he was
me.
dissecting. What was he dissecting?
Squid
A squid axiom. How could I not?
Not
Axon. A squid axle. Yeah. So things like that. Like, an example that comes to mind for me is with the black mat layer that proves that an asteroid impact killed the dinosaurs. So before that was discovered, one of the prevailing theories was that there was a huge amount of volcanic activity in what's now Siberia.
I thought it was
and
a
that,
flood.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Oh, you're raising my blood pressure. And so there was a theory that it was a large amount of volcanic activity in what's now Siberia.
Why are they just guarding?
And there's still some evidence to support that. I'm not really getting into that right now, but either way, it was found through extensive research from these 2 guys that there was a lot of evidence that it was an asteroid impact, and now that's like the widely accepted theory of what was the main thing that wiped out the dinosaurs. And I think it's really easy for pseudoscientists to cling to things like that, because it's a time when that rogue scientist went against everyone. Everyone told him not to, and he was right in the end, and that's great.
That's me too.
Exactly, but this goes back to
Oh
that
my
whole
god,
thing
he
of,
does no damage.
if you do the problem all the way through, are you getting 2 points on it or 8 points on it, even if you don't get the right answer at the end? Where it's like, if you were wrong pretty much from the start, it's not the same thing as being a scientist who's like, okay, I have a lot of evidence here, and just because you guys don't believe me, I'm gonna keep researching this because I'm and then they find evidence of it. If you were wrong at point 1, keep going, but you're still going to be wrong at the end, you know?
Not only are those guys usually engaged in good epistemic practice and good, research practice, another thing, too, I think that's changed in our scientific environment is we know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. And whereas, 200, 300 years ago, maybe it was possible for one man, standing on the shoulders of a couple other people to make huge strides in discoveries relating to electricity or, stuff or discoveries, inventions for light bulbs and stuff like that. It's a lot harder today for one guy to invent a new microprocessor. When you get into these really specialized fields, man, these papers sometimes will have, 50 authors.
Are they not gonna
published in the
heal?
et al section. These are a lot of people working on these projects. So it's harder to see this one genius that revolutionized, microprocessor architecture. It's nobody even knows the names of the scientists that are working on this stuff now, but they're incredibly important. They're in every single device that we use. Leaning back on kind of what you said before, I feel like a lot of people just don't know how a thing works. And when you don't know the underlying stuff or you don't understand the process, it's very easy for the mind to insert a lot of conspiratorial nonsense, basically.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that the other thing that's, worth noting on that is when there is, we'll use the dinosaur, the asteroid impact as an example again. That was obviously a huge discovery. That changed a lot. That being said, it didn't like fundamentally change everything we know about everything. And that's also really important to note, is that a lot of the, you know, inventions, yes, I totally agree. There's, you know, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. And even with scientific discoveries, again, like there are so many people in those papers and there's a lot of research that goes into making any of these discoveries. But it's very infrequent.
I'm just gonna redo this battle. Like, I think I'm just
fundamentally
fucked,
changes everything about everything we know. And that's a really good way that you can kind of identify pseudoscience, because they claim that their discovery that
it's only with the strike. God, that really
changes
fucks
literally
me.
everything.
Because no one does
There's
strike.
a short story. I don't know if I call this a short story, an essay written by. Do you know who Isaac Asimov is?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the one that he writes about how flat earthers aren't like completely incorrect?
Ooh, I don't think so. No.
It's a very good little short essay that builds on that idea, and that flat Earth, as opposed to the idea of like a random crazy Earth or whatever, is actually very close to the idea of a round Earth. You're only off by like, I don't know what the degree is, but like 1 degree of like, you know, change that would cause the planet to be round. So the person that has thought that the entire Earth is flat has made a more intelligent judgment than the person who thinks it might just be completely
you're
random.
extrapolating.
Exactly. And then from there, he's like, well, technically, if you think the world is a sphere, it's not. It's like an oblate spheroid or whatever, because it bulges in the middle because of gravitational whatever. And he's like, so if you think the Earth is round, you're also wrong, but you're not as wrong as the guy who thinks it's flat, who's not as wrong as the guy who thinks it's random. And if you think it's an oblate spheroid, you're not as wrong as the guy that might know more. It kind of plays into that idea, or not plays into it, but it reminds me of this saying, like, every model is wrong, but they're all like good approximations.
It's just which one's closest.
Yeah, the idea of flipping an entire field on its head is almost never going to happen unless it's a very, very, very new field, maybe.
Yes.
And when somebody speaks about that, like, this changes everything, how did everybody miss it?
Yeah, exactly. And like that's the thing, is like there will constantly be new discoveries, and especially in new fields. Like, you know, the big one, I talked about this in my recent video on the expanding Earth conspiracy, where like when we discovered, you know, plate tectonics, like that's huge. That changes pretty much everything. But plate tectonics was based on continental drift, which was kind of close to plate tectonics. It's the whole thing about the Earth being flat. You know, the guy who thinks it's flat is not quite as, you know, is a little bit more wrong than the other guy. So like we're refining it. Like it is like, again, diminishing returns as you go. There's going to be more and more. So let's say we discover some new field of science. The discoveries that are made in that in the early years of its existence are going to be huge. They're going to be,
which is why they're always so exciting too.
Totally.
Like new fields are, yeah.
But like the claims made by a lot of pseudo-archaeology people is, you know, we found that there is evidence that there is a whole civilization that covered the whole planet that we've somehow just missed. Like, that is a massive claim, and outstanding claims require outstanding evidence, and there's not even outstanding evidence. There's not even evidence.
Not any evidence, yeah.
So you know, we end up with this problem where it's like, it's not like someone with, you know, the asteroid where they're like, hey, we think we have evidence of this thing, we're gonna kind of chase it down, and, you know, they're what they discover changes something. It changes a factor of it. They're claiming that their discovery will change everything.
Yeah.
And that's a red flag. Watch out for that, you know?
I think there's, in talking about like it changes everything, I think there's like few moments where you have paradigm shifts in a field, right?
Totally.
Quantum mechanics, epigenetics are like the two easiest point to. I don't actually know. I'd be super curious. I wonder if major paradigm shifts in like established fields occur like 10 to 15 years after a major new technology leap. Like for example, with human brain organoids, I suspect we're at the precipice of a pretty big paradigm shift, just because we can finally research human brains in a way that ethically we just never could, right? So there's a pretty good chance that we're going to start understanding the development of autism and really know what it is and looks like, because you just can't like pull fetus brains out and like put them in the vat, obviously, for obvious reasons, right? And I don't actually know, but I wonder, like, paradigm shifts do occur, but I think it's really important that people realize they occur like rarely. They truly are exceptional events, and they're in part exceptional because the entire field is going to fight them, because the burden of evidence, like if you watch and understand like the fight between Einstein and Bohr before quantum mechanics was even accepted as a plausibility, it was a huge, like decades-long battle, because the burden of evidence for extraordinary claims is extraordinary, and those claims can sometimes come true, but the issue is when they do come true, they are major century-wide historical events in the field.
Not only that, but I think it's important too, like, because even the term paradigm shift I think is a bit misleading, because it makes people think that everything that we knew is totally wrong and now there's a whole new thing. Usually the reason why these shifts are happening is because because there are some problems that aren't solved or aren't working.
Yeah.
And then once they've viewed a thing a new way, like this paradigm shift has happened, there are other things that were unsolvable. Then I was like, oh shit. Like without knowing anything at all about archaeology, which I know nothing about, I'm sure that once that asteroid theory became more popular, I'm sure there were a ton of different people out there that were looking at different things like, oh shit, this thing makes more sense. Like I see why the temperature or whatever was there. That actually makes more sense now. Like that'll happen. There's very rarely, or probably never, is there a huge paradigm shift where it's like, not only is there a paradigm shift, man, I don't know all about anything that's happened. Burn all those papers. Ground the planes. They're not gonna fly anymore. Like me, I guess, right?
Like that just doesn't really happen. And like, and the other thing that is worth noting is this kind of alt history crowd talk about it like archaeology is they're dogmatic and won't accept any changes. And it's like there are paradigm shifts in archaeology all the goddamn time, and they're paradigm shifts made by archaeologists.
Like, and most of the pseudoscientists that are making claims are usually building off of at least a little bit some archaeologists claim themselves. Yeah, like, where's your original research?
You aren't doing any, you're not digging, you're not researching, you're just taking other archaeologists' claims, misinterpreting them, and then adding your own bullshit on. So it's like, I mean, again, we're going back to it, it's the classic one, but like Göbekli Tepe, like it's the site that pushed back the idea of sedentism by like, thousands of years. It's
what country is that in?
It's in Turkey. It's in the Anatolia region. Yeah, southeastern Turkey. And then, Karahan Tepe, which is theorized as the oldest settlement on Earth. It's like 11,000, 12,000 years old. It's like crazy,
I just realized I fucked up.
It means hill. It means hill. Yeah. So Karahan Tepe is, or Göbekli Tepe is the.
I was just spam clicking. I wasn't thinking. My brain turned off.
Like those discoveries were made by archaeologists who, when they found them, began excavating, dated the sites, figured out how old they were, published their studies, and now you get a bunch of grifters clinging onto them and trying to come up with their own bullshit. It's a beautiful irony. I'm like, do you guys not realize that the very people that you're like calling to have like, fired or, they're not doing enough and they're hiding shit. I'm like, you wouldn't exist without them.
Dude, this battle sucks so much.
Or show me anything you've done that's like made. So that's why I said earlier, we just need to have two separate societies. Because then, okay, well, show me. I want to see what you invent on your own. You don't believe in the FDA. You don't believe in universities. You believe, okay, then show me what you can do. I want to see it. Yeah, let's see something. Yeah.
They get Texas or where they?
I don't know. Yeah, they go to Montana.
Have fun with your first, cholera outbreak.
Yeah, show me how that works. Show me how you get through that. Yeah. How do you know like what GitHub is, or do you program it all, or?
Barely.
Oh,
barely.
Yeah. It's just like this idea of like, there's like this huge line of collective wisdom that's passed down through like all of this different work, and then at some point you're gonna branch off and say all of that is bullshit, and I figured it out. Like, the fact that you can even make this statement
it's ridiculous.
Is a testament to what, like, you're talking about what? About like layers of the earth? How do you even know about that? Oh, because other people.
Someone dug it. Yeah. I've been really into crosswords lately. I finally spent the money. I finally spent the money and got the New York Times puzzle app, and I have been loving the crosswords. And I feel like there's an analogy to be made there, where like I've been finding that where you get like you get your first pass, your second pass, and you're starting to get some things in place, and there's just this part that just doesn't work, and you're like, none of this makes sense. There's literally no word that has PXD next to each other, and then you're like, oh, one of these words is wrong. And the moment you figure out what that right word is, everything else falls into place, and you're like, oh, well, there you go. Like, I didn't have to restart the puzzle. I didn't have to like throw it out and start from the top. It wasn't that everything was wrong. It's like, okay, sometimes you hit a dead end. Like, science works like that, where you're gonna it relies on getting things wrong so that you can know what's right. You won't know what's right unless you make some mistakes,
And it makes predictions. Make a fucking prediction.
Yes.
It doesn't work when we talked about this earlier, the all roads lead to Rome, where literally no matter what the outcome is, you're going to say your particular pet theory predicted that outcome. Like, make an actual prediction, and let's see if there anything matches up there. We spent how much money building these massive particle colliders. Was the Higgs boson, was that theorized to exist in the 40s? Like, these particles were things, they didn't discover them brand new.
Yeah.
Like, these were predicted to, they were part of the standard model, and they existed for a long time. We weren't able to see them, but they were predicted to have existed. Yeah.
And that's a really important point to make with this conversation about Göbekli Tepe too, where like the alt history pseudoscience people will cling to this idea of like, when Göbekli Tepe was discovered, like it changed everything, and archaeologists were wrong. And it's like, no one ever said that like this is how old any structure is and as old as it will ever get. We were always open like, okay, well, this is the oldest thing we've found. We're probably gonna find stuff older than that.
And even more than that, the question is, if they had no idea, and everything, how the f did they even know to dig there? The Earth is a big place. There's a lot of places to go. The fact that you're even researching in that direction probably shows that there is like some inclination or some idea, unless it was discovered completely by accident. But like, yeah, it's ridiculous.
It is, and you know, the other interesting thing I think about Göbekli Tepe is, you know, it dates to right around the beginning of, or it predates when, you know, previous evidence suggested agriculture arose. And so that's been the really big thing, is like they think it may push back the date of agriculture. Like there's domesticated wheat that, you know, was found to have been like it branched off from a wild strain in like within 40 miles of where Göbekli Tepe is, in like, you know, within like a few hundred years of when Göbekli Tepe was built. And so, you know, there's this whole idea that, you know, within archaeology, that complex society, you know, with you know, stone structures and things like that required agriculture in order to be able to like feed enough people to make those. So you didn't see a lot of that in hunter-gatherer societies. That's not saying it's impossible. That's just saying that we haven't seen a lot of it, and there is a pretty big increase in megalithic architecture once we figure out how to plant stuff on the ground, you know?
Please.
So, but no one.
This was a dumb fight. I just did not have the right archetypes at all.
We're never going to find anything older, or that there wasn't
I need to definitely look into like a much better team composition.
And we just don't have the answers yet. And this is where the alt history crowd are sort of self-reading, where they're viewing it as being so black and white. They're like, well, it has to be either this or this. And it's like, no, we just don't really know yet. Like, we are working on uncovering that. Every discovery is a new discovery. We're going to keep learning. It's not like, you know, they throw the baby out with the bathwater, where it's like, ah, this thing changed a little bit of what you said, and so everything is wrong and I'm right. It's like, no.
There's also a bit of that perspective versus retrospective too, and it's I always look bad in these arguments. It's so frustrating where like somebody will predict, they'll say something, I bet that this thing is absolutely gonna happen or whatever, and it's like, for what reason? You have no reason to even think that. And like, oh, so you're saying it's possible? No, I mean, it could. You know, I'm not sure. Maybe 50-50. I don't know. Like, there's a chance that this particular event will happen in this way, but I'm not sure. And then eventually, if the event does happen, now people are like, looks like you were wrong. And I was like, what do you, I said it's possible. It's like, well, this guy knew 100%. No, he didn't. It just happened to happen. Like, what the
Yeah, like this wasn't on a timer until he decided if it did or didn't.
Yeah,
like you were gonna just let the clock run down until it happened.
Yeah.
Like what? My God, ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's also really important for people to understand, right, when you're talking about that black and white thinking. I'll have a lot of people be like, yeah, but I come across this person who's an academic and they're being black and white about this thing. And I'm like, okay, that scientist is being ascientific in that moment. That's bad. Yes. That's bad and wrong, but also they're people. Of course. There are there are assholes in every group, and sometimes they're scientists, and right now they're you know, and that is just the way that it goes.
Also, why are you pretending to care about this guy just because he's a doctor and he has an opinion? Why not look at the field?
Yes, exactly. And that's really where it is, where they find the sacrificial lamb and they're like, well, this one guy did this thing. And like the amount of times I've seen some poor, you know, like PhD student or scientist get roped into this bullshit where they said one thing and they're like, see, this guy said about the ice core samples that this, that, and the other thing. It's like, he didn't say that. You said that. He gave you like a few numbers and you ran with it to a completely different direction. And now this poor bastard has his name on your mess. And it's like, that's just not the whole, that's not the point, you know? And every once in a while, like you said, you do come across a scientist who is, you know, engaging in bad science. And that doesn't mean that science as a whole is a bad practice or inherently flawed. It just means you met someone who's just being kind of a dick. Like, there's kind of a dick everywhere. Like,
well, and also, yeah, a scientist is not science. Right?
Exactly.
It's a whole process.
It's an individual,
of like,
yes.
Yeah, it's like having one dude that lives on a planet claiming that like he is science and he's like publishing peer-reviewed research, and it's like, who the f is your peer? Are you DID or what?
He
what
knows
do you
everything about archology, botany, medicine, psychology.
Yeah,
I am the scientist.
Yeah, I am the science, and it's like, how? Like, what if you're going? It's self-defeating if you think about it for 2 seconds. Like, you're appealing to the authority of this guy, but the only reason we grant authority to scientists is because they exist as part of this broader apparatus.
I did all the bounty
quests. We wouldn't give them
quests.
any authority if they all operated independently. They would just be people that know a lot of stuff. So how would you grant authority to a guy who's standing in opposition to the field when the only reason we give people in this field authority is because they stand with the field? It doesn't make any sense. You don't go to a hospital to get a new heart transplant done in any way that a surgeon imagines it. There's like a way that they learn it in school through the entire system.
All right, I'm gonna try a new method. Everyone check this out.
All right, Jim, I was thinking about sheep hearts. How do you think about it?
Might work.
Okay.
I had a random
I need to go to
question. It might be
sleep.
out of scope, but
It's like midnight.
I was obsessed. Like,
Okay. Let's see. I think next time I'm just gonna try to finish all the ally things, and then I can power farm like another 4 or 5 levels. I don't know, I have to check to see what the boss's levels are for the final area. I might just do some like off-stream grinding, because it literally is like just gonna take hours and hours. Yeah. Sorry this was kind of just like a low energy stream. Very late in the night. I wanted to stream earlier today, but I was busy. But I don't know, I might just do more podcast listening streams. I mean, I don't know, it helps keeps me from getting bored and being alone. So I don't know, I'll think about it. Anyways, hope everyone has a good rest of their evening. Morning, day, night, whatever. I will see you all later.